Hey guys, before we get kicking off here, I just want to get a quick voice and visual check. You guys can see me. Hi. And I want to make sure you can hear me and that the sound's working okay. So if I can get a couple of comments in the comment thread, if you guys can hear me okay, and we'll get things going in about 10 minutes. Let's see. Now, we're running on a 14-second loop, basically. From the time I say something, it's 14 seconds before I see anything back here. And I'm just now catching up to the comment thread. And test 1 2 3, voice check 1 2 3, loud and clear. Okay, very good. 5 by 5. That's great. No, Chris, we haven't started yet. What I do is I try to when I can actually get ahead of the program, I try to get things up for about 15-20 minutes early so folks can get signed in. You can chat amongst each other, sort of a pre-roll call thing. We're not technically going yet, so I'll send you guys back to the intro for a few minutes. I just want to get a voice check and a visual check. And then we're going to, Jim Keeler's waiting for me to call him, so we'll be chatting with him. For those who don't know, Jim used to work at both Revell and Aurora. So a lot of great stories. And boy, I tell you what, I got the one pair of glasses for reading, and even though they're trifocals, I got to get the other pair of glasses for seeing myself clear on the computadora. Okay, well, I'll send you guys back to the intro for a few minutes, and then we'll get going here in about 10 minutes. And we should be live now. I'm going to turn the volume up
Okay.
here. If you can give me a 5 count.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. Guys, if you can hear that, let me know, and I can move the microphone a little closer. And I think I got the volume up all the way. I guess I can turn the gain up a little bit. We're on it's about a 14-second delay between between when I speak and I get information back for it to go,
Okay.
satellites linking up in outer space. And so if you hear me say hi to somebody, hey Fred, that just means somebody's just signing in. I'm just,
Sure.
Guys, if you can hear me and Jim, let me know. Also, okay, I got one says all set on sound, 5x5. Okay, it sounds like you're coming through pretty good.
Great.
Technically, we don't start for 3 minutes because of my limited technical prowess. I like to try to go a little bit early, so I spend the first couple of minutes just chattering about nonsense until 7 o'clock in case, so people who show up right at time don't miss anything.
Okay.
First off, how you doing?
Well, I just had my gallbladder out 3 weeks ago.
I heard.
And recovering from that. That was a freaking disaster.
But I hear you're doing better now.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Well, that's good. I had told Steve, by the way, guys, here I go off on a tangent already. That picture of the LeSabre that I got was from Steve's Model Mania. I did not realize he spells his name PH. So when Mr. Willett sent me the note, said from your friend Steven, I was like, oh, which one? So again, Steve's Model Mania, thanks. That's a beautiful piece of artwork. I was something I showed on that I got in the mail that I was showing folks yesterday.
Yeah.
What do you mean and Steve, what do you mean the first few minutes? Yeah, this is pretty much Australia all the way. It must be that German blood in me. We began on time. But in completely unrelated news, apparently a family member of mine did one of those ancestry things.
Uh-huh.
And supposedly the group of people with the highest IQ of any group of people are the Ashkenazi Jews. It's like Einstein and Teller and those guys.
Right.
Well, I found out that I'm 50% Ashkenazi. My dad's family was from East, was that part of the world. And
Right.
And the first thought that popped in my mind is like, well, it is losing the battle against my blondness. Maybe as I gray out, I'll get smarter.
Blonde I'm not.
So if they removed your gallbladder, that means you no longer have any gall, you won't interrupt people or anything?
No, I won't be able to do that anymore.
Okay,
Change my
guys.
personality.
Well, that's great. Guys, it's 7 o'clock straight up. Time to get this show on the road. So I have Jim Keeler on the phone with me, and Jim worked at both Revell and Aurora. He knew Lou Glazer, Royal Glazer. He worked for all those people, and he got about 1,001 stories. And he was a good friend of the late, great Andy Yanchus, who we all dearly miss. And so I guess the best thing to kick off with, since this started off essentially as a kit model history channel. And by the way, I think I'd mentioned this before, Jim also was almost a participant in the Fisher body car model thing that we talked about before, because he's a master modeler and his models are in there's a museum out there in Utah for, was it hot rod models? And some of your stuff's in there?
It's the National Model Car Builders Museum.
Yeah, and I know a bunch of your stuff's on display there.
Yeah.
And when I zoomed with you some time back, just the stuff you had sitting on your workbench made me drool. So, Jim, I'm going to hand it over to you, and why don't you just give us the quick background on how you ended up at Revell?
Well, it's a kind of an interesting story. I started building model cars when I was 4 years old by taking my brother's 1930s die-cast toys and painting them with a brush. And because they used to bake cars, I figured that I'd bake the paint on the models. So then I put them in a trash can, or in a big steel can, built a fire around them, of course, to pardon the pain. And of course, what I ended up with was a nice blob with 4 rubber tires on it. So I destroyed a lot of my brother's beautiful 1930s toys. And then I got into building model airplanes right after that. And then when they would crash, I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. So then I found an Ace, 1949 Ace model kit of Ford. And the instructions basically were, it came with a block of wood. And it said basically remove everything that doesn't look like a 49 Ford. and so
now what about what year? About what year was this?
That was 1949.
So plastic models weren't really a thing much yet.
No, they hadn't come out yet. And then Monogram came out with the plastic. I think they were called Plastibuild. I can't remember. And they were wooden aircraft models that had plastic parts like the nacelles and propellers, the nose, and then you built this thing out of balsa wood.
Was that the Speedy Builds?
Those things. What's that?
Was that the Speedy Builds?
Speedy Builds, yeah, that's right. Monogram Speedy Builds. So I built those, and then the next thing I built was a model of Constellation passenger liner, beautiful airplane, the Constellation, one of my favorites, and glued it together with Duco cement. And of course, 2 days later, it all fell apart. And then Revell came out with the Highway Pioneers.
No, those were gallon repops, right?
They were gallon repops.
Can you tell us a little bit about gallon? Because there's not a lot of information on them floating around.
Well, gallon were 2 brothers in England, and they hired a guy who was a master model builder, designer, and he did all the patterns and for the tooling for those kits, and they were really the first production model car kits. Revell did 32nd scale Ford, not 32nd scale, excuse me, a 32 Ford Roadster. It was kind of a caricature, and it was sort of around 16th scale, and that was really the first plastic model car kit. And then he got involved with the people from Gallon and made arrangements to have those kits manufactured in the United States. The first year of sales of those kits, and this was 1952 or 53, Revell did $1.5 million in those kits.
Now, just off the top of my head, that's about I'm going to say $45 million today, maybe 40
today, exactly.
Wow, Revell was already that had to be like their. I don't know how big Revell was, but that had to be one of their best-selling products.
That was one of their best-selling products. Their best-selling product was their first real plastic model kit, besides the 32 Ford, was the Battleship Missouri, right after World War II, of course. Mm-hmm. And Lou Glazer did something interesting. He wanted to do a model kit of it, but he didn't have the money for the tooling when he found out what the tooling was going to cost. So he got this really brilliant idea that virtually no one knows anything about. And what he did was he formed a corporation called the Battleship Missouri Model Corporation. And then he had friends subscribe to it, putting money into it, okay, buying stock in the company. And he did that for every one of his kits, for about 20 kits. Every single kit was a separate corporation.
Really?
Okay. Yeah. And that's how he financed them. And after he had done quite a few, he finally sold a lot of them. And they sold a lot of the Highway Pioneers. He went to the banks, and the bank said, "Oh, well, okay, fine. Now we'll finance it." Mm-hmm. But that's how they all got done, was a corporation for every model kit.
So
the crisscross cruiser, the airplanes, the battleships, cruisers, and so forth and so on.
So that's
It was
interesting.
all
So Lou, every time Lou says, "Okay, Revell's going to make a new kit," he would start an entire new incorporation, get investors just for that one kit, so that if it
yeah,
tanked, it didn't affect the rest of the other company.
exactly, and
He's a
that's
clever
how he
guy.
got the company started. I didn't find this out until just last year, and I have a complete list of all of those corporations and when they were founded and the whole routine. And I thought it was rather brilliant on his part. So anyway, so I built almost all of the Revell kits up until the time I was hired by Revell. I had a bedroom of my own. I lived with my father. My parents were divorced, so I was living just with my dad alone. And my dad was always commenting, this is such a waste of money. I don't know why you do this, and he complained every time I'd come home with a new model kit. So I would put rags under the door, close the door at night, and work on them in the middle of the night in my bedroom, so he wouldn't know that I got another one new one. so,
I'm
so
just
my home,
covert midnight model building. I mean, you are off the chains.
absolutely. So anyway, I continued doing that, and then Revell played around with AMT, and they were planning on bringing out some kits together, um, and even the AMT name and the Revell name were on the same box for a couple of years. And this was in 55, 56, roughly. And of course, AMT was doing all their models, and so I was buying those now and building those and entering contests. And I always won first place. I have one second place trophy, and everything else I ever entered, except for one contest, I won first place in. So I got involved. I'm living in Southern California, and in San Diego, and of course that was the car world in the 50s was San Diego, L.A., Modesto, Northern California, and so I made a deal with the hobby stores in San Diego to put on a model car contest, all of them together, and there were about, I don't know, 20 or 30 stores at that time. And so I made up all the rules and printed all this stuff up and took it around to the stores at my expense, and offered to judge the contest if they wanted me to, or they could judge them.
Now, how old were
And
you
then
when you were doing this?
I was 15.
A 50-year.
When I
I'm running a contest, and I mean, I'm just thinking of the go-getter nature you had to have to get this done.
So, well, kind of. So anyway, I then made arrangements with the people who put on the real car show in San Diego in October in Balboa Park, and they bought glass cases and bought trophies, and we made up coupons for model builders to get in for half price. And so we had all of these people brought their models down, and we had this giant contest.
Well, what year was this?
This would have been 56 or so,
Okay.
57.
All right.
Yeah. And so we did that each year. And I even did one in LA at the Trident's Arena. That was a big deal. And I also did the very first mail-in model car contest, because the group that put on the car show, they saw what I was doing and wanted to get involved. So they funded what I call the American Model Car Association, AMCA. And we put ads in publications, and we had a national mailing contest, which I think was in 59 or 60. I can't remember. 60, I guess. And that ended up having all the cars at the Trident Sports Arena in LA at the big LA car show there. Well, all of this was going on, and George Barris, of course, would hit all these shows. I met Ed Roth when I was 15 at the San Diego car show.
Well, you and Ed became good friends.
So I got to know him quite well. And at every car show, he and I would buddy it up and talk and everything else. I also met George Barris and all the other famous people that were involved in the shows. And George was there doing photographs and he took photographs of all the model cars in my contest there. And they published them in the little spotlight books, little 25-cent ones. And he used a lot of the models from my contest in those books. And through that, I got exposure to Peterson Publishing in LA. So then, a couple of years later, then I continued to build just for the fun of it. I didn't enter any contests anymore. But for my contests, I thought it would be cool if I could get the manufacturers, national manufacturers, to donate models to give away as prizes. And so I contacted AMT by mail, and they sent out 2 cases of the Roadster and the Model T Ford, with the Lincoln engine in it. And I figured Revell was in Los Angeles, and my dad was in the airline business, and I had a pass that I could fly from San Diego to LA for $1.
And how old were you at this time?
What's that?
How old were you?
15, 16, 17 by now.
I just want to make sure that people are painting the right picture. This is a 16-year-old kid doing this. Okay.
Yeah, right. So then, well, one thing I learned early on in life, when I was a little kid, was always ask somebody, because all they can do is say no. Okay? And a lot of my life was based around the fact that I'd ask people about doing things, and sometimes they'd say no, and sometimes they'd say yes, and out of that, I'd get a great experience. So a lot of that had taken place during my whole life, from when I was a little kid. So anyway, we had, I thought, well, I'd go up and talk to Revell. So I called Revell and talked to their public relations guy, whose name was Henry Blankford. And Henry said, well, I'd love to meet with you. Come on up. So I flew up on my dad's airline and PSA, and then I took a cab from the airport to Revell, and went in and met Henry Blankford. Well, Henry was vice president of PR, but he was also extremely well known in the Hollywood circuit with TV stars and movie people, and so he knew all these people. So anyway, Henry and I really hit it off, and he provided models for the contest. He was very happy to do that, and I took those back with me. And then they supported all of those that I did. And then I had taken a couple of my models up there to show him what I had done, and they were doing the Chrysler cars at the time, 61 Chrysler cars. This was in late 1960. And so he gave me a case of the HO scale Chrysler cars. And he said, okay, you're so smart, build this, customize this. So I took it home, and I got a Plymouth station wagon, and I opened the doors, made an interior. It was a station wagon.
Wait a minute, this is HO scale, so this car is like 2 inches long.
Yeah, less than 2 inches long, actually. And I opened the hood, and I built an 87th scale engine and put the engine in it. The back station wagon door opened, and had a deck in there, and then it was painted pearl white, and I had made special wheels and tires for it, So I took that up to Henry, and I gave it to him. He kept it on his desk. Well, he was astounded with it, So
yeah, I would have been also. I can barely see HO scale. Never mind making itty bitty little part.
Well, remember, I was a teenager at the time, and I still could see.
Yeah,
I couldn't see it now. So, and just for reference, I'm 81 now. So anyway, I 2 or 3 or 4 visits into visiting with Henry Blankford, and then I did this car in 1960, and it was the Monogram 30 Ford tub, and I took the tub, and using dental plastic, which I learned about because I had braces. And so I bought this expensive, really expensive material, and I was building models out of it. And I customized this 30 Ford with an Ed Roth look, okay? And so, and then I put a turbine engine in it, and it had the front end off of a B-52 jet engine for the nose, and the rest of it was all customized with a custom interior and the whole routine, you know. And I took that up to Henry, and so we're visiting, and then he says, Keeler, he says, there's somebody I'd like you to meet here. Do you have the time? And I says, oh, absolutely, I've got plenty of time. So he took me downstairs, and he took me into Royal Glazer's office. Well, Royal was the vice president and co-founder of Revell.
Let me hold you up for just a second. For the one or two people out there who don't know, Royal Glazer was Lou Glazer's wife. She was a Berkeley graduate, and she was, like you said, the co-founder of Revell. And I call her the Queen of Styrene.
She was the Queen of Styrene, and she dressed like she just got out of Vogue magazine.
Yeah, she apparently had quite the reputation as a lovely lady, very classy, and always in top fashion.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're what, 18 years old?
By that time I'm 18. Okay.
So you are now this 18-year-old in his Sunday go to meeting best. I just want to paint the picture of everyone is before the great goddess of models.
Yeah, and I'm dressed in a pair of Levi's and probably an Ed Roth shirt at the time.
It's right. I mean, I swear to God, there's a movie in here.
Actually, a guy started a movie about me. That's the honest to God's truth, okay? So,
I believe it.
Anyway.
Because you got to understand one thing before you go any further. You and I had very different upbringings.
Well, you probably, at 5 years old, did not take yourself on a guided tour of a slaughterhouse like I did.
Yeah, at 5 years old, my mom tried to get me to quit picking my nose in public. And she was still fighting that battle. So anyway,
yeah. So anyway, he took me downstairs, and he introduced me to Royal and had me sit down, and then he left. And there I am sitting there talking to Royal Glazer, and she's asking me all these questions. I had 2 or 3 of my models, and I put those down in front of her, including the turbine tub and a couple of other things. I can't remember what all I had there. So, and so we talked for about half an hour. And then she leaned over her desk and looked at me I couldn't see it at the time, but later on I realized the facial expression she had was like she was asking me to spend an evening. Okay. That's how it came on. And she leans over the desk and says to me, "How would you like to work here at Revell?" And meanwhile, my knees started shaking so bad.
And you're like, I am not worthy.
And I'm going, "You're joking, of course." And she says, No, I'm serious. We need somebody like you.
Well, she had an eye for talent.
Yeah, so, and she said, go down and see the guy in personnel at the end of the hallway on the left or whatever, and let's get rolling. So I was 18 at the time, and 2 weeks later, a week later, I turned 19, and a week after that, April 13th, 1961, I started working at Revell. And initially, what they had me doing was...
By the way, just for the record, folks, this is like you said, April, May, June, July, August, September.
Yeah.
This is 5 months before I was born.
Sorry.
No, it's just keeping the perspective there, you know.
Yeah. So anyway, they put me in a little office and said, "We want you to take items that we have here, and we're thinking about modifying them to make kits out of, but we want to, do something fun." And the first one they gave to me to do was the 61, the Chrysler Slant 6 engine kit, the quarter scale one.
Mm-hmm.
And for you guys that don't know, they had Chrysler Corporation helped to finance this thing, and Chrysler gave them a real Slant 6 engine with a serial number on it. and they made moldings off of it, and then they reduced them by 1/4 with a pantograph and cut the steel from the actual real engine. So it was real. I mean, okay. And when it's built upright, you can't tell it from a real engine. And so,
is this a visible engine, or is it?
No. It had removable pieces so you could see inside.
Okay, all right.
So it was molded in cast iron, red, and black, I believe, 3 or 4 colors, and silver, I think. In this great big huge molding machine. And so, so what I did with it was I turned it into a hot rod engine. So I did all the research on it, and I designed and built a ram air manifold for it. And we had the quarter scale Chevy engine that they had done for General Motors. And so there were quarter scale 4-barrel carburetors that had all the parts inside. And I put 2 of those on the model. And of course, all this stuff had to be chrome plated after I made it. So I got to go to the plating plant, which is over by the LA airport, which was fun, and go in there and leave all my stuff off, and they'd plate it, and then I'd go down and pick it up and bring it back and put it on the model. So I made this big presentation model of this thing, and it had a chrome oil pen on it, chrome valve covers, and I mean, it was really nice. And then they presented it to management, the vice presidents of the various groups in the company, to decide if they wanted to modify the original kit and put all this stuff in it. And they turned it down, so that didn't happen. And the model ended up in the R&D department. I don't even remember seeing it again after that.
But the original Slant 6 that you did for them did go into production.
Oh yeah, it was in production. Yeah.
Any idea how many units they sold?
I have no idea. No, I really don't. I may be able to find that out though, because all of Revell's archives are now in the possession of Atlantis Models in New York, and they have actually gone through and seen some of the stuff I've written and my name on stuff. so when I go back there eventually, I'm hopefully to look some of this up. So, and then we went on and did other stuff, and I had been there about 6 weeks, and they started me out on an hourly pay, and it was a good hourly rate. I mean, and so I had left Convair in San Diego.
What did you do at Convair?
Convair Consolidated Vultee Aircraft Corporation.
What did you do there?
I used my model building skills to make duplicate panels that's when they started gluing plastic together and aluminum together to make airplane parts.
Oh.
And using Hexcel, which is a hexagonal aluminum, really lightweight. And I had to build these panels, and so they could be x-rayed by the people on the line. But I had to build mine not perfect. I had to build mine with defects. So it was tricky stuff. And then they'd send these over to the assembly line, and when they were working on that particular part, and I made a lot of different ones, they could look at my stuff and say, oh, that's got a void in it. Oh, wait a minute, the production one we just made can't go on the airplane because it's got the same kind of a void.
So it was sort of a quality control thing.
What's that?
Sort of a quality control thing.
Yeah, it was a quality control thing, yeah. And I also worked on the Atlas missile while I was there. I started there in October of 60, and I was there until April of 61. So anyway, I had been at Revell there for about 6 weeks, and I get a call from the personnel office, and they said, we need to have you. Oh, and I was coming to work 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning and staying until 2 or 3 in the morning. And I lived just a few blocks away, so the plant was close, and I enjoyed doing it, so I did. I had access to the factory anytime I wanted. So anyway, so I go down to the personnel office, and I thought, well, I guess I'm losing my job. And I go in and sit down, and she says, "Well, Mr. So-and-so will see you now." And I went in, and he says, "Close the door, please," very solemnly. And I closed the door, and I thought, "Yep, losing my job." So he looks at me, and he says, "Well, Keeler," he says, "we have a problem here." And then I thought, "Oh, for sure I'm losing my job." And I just sat there. And he says, "We hired you at an hourly rate." And he says, "And you're working so many hours, you're going to take us bankrupt. So we've decided to put you on salary and give you a raise." Well, the raise they gave me was equivalent to what my father was making in the airline business after a lifetime of work in it. It was a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I was totally, completely, absolutely floored. So what happened is then they moved me up to the R&D department, and there was a guy there whose name was Jack Campbell, who's probably long gone by now, so I can mention his name. And he was an absolute anti hot rod or custom car guy.
Oh, one of those.
Yeah, he was a Bugatti enthusiast, and he hated custom cars and hot rods. He hated Ed Roth. He hated George Barris.
You caught me off guard with that one.
So
hated Ed Roth. I was like, who hates Ed Roth? Everybody loves Ed Roth.
Well, he hated everybody that had anything to do with anything except classic cars and sports cars. And he drove a little MG, and he had all these friends in the car club thing in LA. So he and I worked together on this stuff, and one of the first projects we did was we drove down to Long Beach in his MG to do all the research, photography on Mickey Thompson's Challenger 1. Now, I had met Mickey about 3 or 4 years before that as well, and was friends with him. So I knew Mickey, I knew Ed Roth, and so we had after I'd been in the R&D department for a while, they came into me one day and they said, "We'd like to do 3 model car kits, and we'd like you to pick them." And I'm going, "Really?"
Okay.
So I'm
you're all of 20 years old by this point.
No, I wasn't even 20. I was 19. I was 19. So I said, "Sure." So I picked, what I tried to do was to pick cars that we could do as model kits that would have a lot of longevity for the company. Not something that would be a flash in the pan, hot rod telephone booth,
Mm-hmm.
So I knew Ed Roth would, and so I picked the Outlaw as the first one. And then I picked Mickey Thompson's Challenger because I was a Bonneville Salt Flats enthusiast and had been following it since I was probably 8 years old on the radio in Salt Lake City. And then 9 years old, 1949, when the first one. And then I always wanted a model kit of the 56 Ford pickup truck because it was my favorite truck. So I picked the 56 Ford. And I thought that that's going to be around for a long time. And as it turns out, it's been around for so long that Revell actually retooled it with the Foose pickup. Okay, still a 56 Ford. So I picked those 3, and then they came in and said, "Now you have to make the presentation at the meeting." And I said, "What do you mean, presentation?" I'm 19 years old. I'd never done a presentation before. I didn't even know what they meant. And I said, "Well, what's involved here?" "Well, you have to come in, tell all the vice presidents of the company what's involved with each of these cars and why should we make them." "Oh, okay." So I made these great big display boards on great big pieces of cardboard and had photographs and sketches and drawings and stuff like that. And I had a display stand, and I had them all sitting there, and I went through, and the first one I introduced was the Challenger, and talked about Mickey, and the car was popular. It went 406 miles an hour on the Salt Flats, had 4 engines, which is going to appeal to a lot of kids to build. And then I said the 56 Ford pickup truck, and so one of the VPs says, no. He says, "Let's just stop where you're at. I want to hear about this guy, Ed Roth." okay, because the word had gotten around that was who I was going to bring up. So they just went ahead and did those first two. Bam, I mean, they were done. So then I start talking about Ed Roth, and they just got really excited. And I had all of these pictures of him and the car, and we talked, and they decided that that's what we would do. So those were the first 3 kits that I did there. Well, the guy, Jack Campbell, he was really ticked off, okay, about this whole thing.
Because he didn't like hot rods.
He didn't like hot rods, no. He thought that was stupid that we were going to do those cars. So, he and I argued and blah, blah, blah. And so...
hold on. Again, trying to paint the full picture for the viewing audience. You're 19 years old. How old was Campbell?
Campbell was probably 40-something, and he'd been with the company 5 or 6 years.
That's what... Here you got the perky young 19-year-old arguing with the veteran senior official. Okay, I just wanted to paint that whole picture for everybody.
The head of R&D.
The head of R&D. Okay.
Yeah, right. So I get this call from my boss, and he says, the secretary comes over and says, Mr. Winslow wants to see you. I went into his office, and he said, close the door, please. And I closed the door.
Here we go with another closed. You were getting a lot of closed-door sessions.
Yes, exactly. So I thought, now what's going on? He says, we have a problem. And I thought, oh, jeez, what's going on here? He says, what? First he said that, and then he said, what, do we have any car shows today? And I said, no. And he says, do you have any outside research to do, like with any of the car designers or builders or libraries or museums or anything like that?
Take the hint, Jim. Yes, I can leave the building right now.
and I didn't know anything about this. And so then I said, I've got all this to do, blah, 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 blah. And I was an extremely busy person doing all this stuff by myself. So then finally he says, well, he says, we're going to let Jack Campbell go today, and we don't think you should be here.
Whoa!
And I says, I don't think I should either. And he says, enjoy your prime rib lunch. It's on us.
So hold on. Let's see if I get. Hold on. Again, just painting the whole picture. The 19-year-old kid is getting a prime rib lunch. The middle-aged veteran senior official is getting the axe.
He's getting canned, yeah.
You guys are having very different days.
Exactly. So I left.
Wisely.
In L.A. And
the first question I would have asked was, does Mr. Campbell own a gun?
Exactly. So, well, he was instrumental in introducing me to the Bugatti. And he actually had one of his friends drive one down and put it in a parking lot and ran the engine for me, so I could hear the 10 million ball bearings going round and round and round. No.
Yeah.
No, I never said a thing. I would have got along with him, and we would have worked together, and blah blah blah. But they saw the handwriting on the wall. And all of this has an interesting beforehand, and that is that last year I discovered in some of my old Revell paperwork that I have a letter from Luke Glazer to the rest of the company, stating to the other vice presidents that it was obvious to him that the hobby kit market was going to be model cars, and he talked about how much money they'd made on the Highway Pioneers and how well they had done with the 32nd cars and the 25th scale cars that they had done with multi-piece bodies. And so, in this letter, he says we need to, look for someone to handle this and help us get this program going for the company. So that's why I got hired. Mm-hmm. And I did not know that. I didn't know that until last year. So that was kind of
Jim, let me stop you for a second. I have a question.
Okay.
Model cars back then, the sides and the tops were separate still. This is before George Tota's side slide method, where they could make the entire shell in one piece.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to, because hopefully we'll get a chance to get back to Totiff later and that. But I just want to make sure we understood that we were still basically doing more or less glorified 2-dimensional stampings. And
Exactly.
he had to make
right,
all of which made them very tricky to build, but I don't have to tell you that.
Exactly. Well, another interesting thing about George Totiff, in January of '61, I went to the Winter Nationals car show in Pomona, and I lived in San Diego, 150 miles south, and I drove up to go to the Winter Nationals and to enter my model car. And it was an AMT 40 Ford Coupe, and I had opened the doors, opened the trunk, detailed the engine, wired it and everything, put tuck and roll upholstery inside, painted it a really beautiful
what scale was this
green,
thing?
and put some custom tires and wheels on it, and I won the contest.
What scale was this car?
25th scale.
And you put tuck and roll upholstery in it?
Yeah, right.
How do you even do that at that scale?
Well, you do a lot of research and spend a lot of money on stuff in different stores, and you take it home and you try it out, and then you go, this doesn't work, throw it away. That's worth $5. This doesn't work, that was $3, throw it away. And that's how you do it. So anyway, I won the contest, and then I'm standing outside the front door of the building where they had the custom car show. I'm on my way out to go over to the drag strip to watch the drag racing, because that was one of my big things too. So this guy stops me, and he says, hi, he says, my name is George Totiff, and at the time I didn't know who George Totiff was. And he says, I'm with AMT Corporation, and we talked for about 20 minutes. And I was anxious to get away from there, and so finally I just left, So that was in January. So in March, I meet George Barris at another car show in the spring, okay? And George comes over to me and he says, Keeler, you really screwed up. And I says, what are you talking about, George? He says, well, at the Winter Nationals, you were talking to George Totiff. He was trying to hire you to design model cars for AMT.
Oh, Lord. Jim, the way you name drop about model cars, it's like, it's like, George Barris was telling about George Totiff, and I'm like, yeah, only the biggest names in the industry. Totiff, when I did the history on AMT, and I don't think I was being hyperbolic, I pretty much said George Totiff may have had the single biggest impact on model cars of any single person in the industry.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he was the biggest single influence on model cars.
But you were a kid. I mean, you didn't know who he was. I get it. There was no internet back then. But man, I mean, I don't want to pick on you, but it's like the path you could have taken.
Oh, I could have taken it, except I would have said we're in Detroit, and I would have said I'm on my way. because to get back to some of the basics as to how I learned how to do what I did when I started working at Revell was I learned about the Fisher Body Craftsman's Guild, and that was a contest put on by General Motors starting in 1930 to have model builders make a model of the coach, Napoleonic coach, that was on the Fisher Body logo on the door panel of every car. Okay, and so they built these. They offered some die-cast metal parts for it, and then the rest of it you had to hand carve it all out of wood and build this coach, paint it, and then you had to build a special box that they had designed and put the model in it and ship it to Detroit where it would be entered in the contest. And you had a year to build it from the end of the last contest to the mailing date.
And that's a year sounds like a lot of time till you look at the work involved.
Yeah, it was a lot of time and it was a lot of work. So then around 1938, they decided, well, we're going to do the coach plus guys can do cars. And their whole objective in this was to find people that they could then award scholarships to, and they would go to design schools, Art Center in LA and Rochester and so forth and so on. And they would become car designers. And that's how they got new car designers. So it was a big,
to be more to the point, you're
GM.
saying car designers. What you really mean is stylists.
Car stylists, exactly. Car styling.
Yes.
So that was a big deal
which is
for me
actually
as
a
a
much more
teenager.
difficult art, I think, than car design. Car design is engineering. Styling, that's a much softer skill.
It's a whole different ballgame, yeah. And I loved cars, and I took art classes in high school. I took drafting classes, mechanical arts classes, um, and I read everything I could about cars, every magazine, every book, blah 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 blah. So I did all of that through high school, and I wanted to become a car designer. It wasn't supposed to be 25th scale though. So anyway, I heard about Fisher Body Craftsman's Guild, and I thought, well, I'm going to build a car. So you had to get a block of wood. They would send you models of the tires, rubber tires, in 12th scale, and they gave you all these drawings and information with the parameters you had to deal with.
And what year was
and
this?
So this was starting in 1956, I believe, 55,
okay.
56. Right. And so I started on the car, and I carved the block out of the body out of a block of wood. And I mounted the tires on it, and I painted it with model airplane butyrate dope. And my paint finish, it looked like, the top of a $50,000 car.
Mm-hmm.
That paint was unbelievable. It was just so incredible. But I never finished it. So then the next year I thought, well, I'm going to do it again. So I waited a while, and then I finally started on another one in the fall of 1960, and or spring of, I guess, fall, December of 1960, whatever. So I got my block of wood, and I started carving it, and it was going really well and looking good, and then Revell hired me, so I never finished it. So I got to end up being a card stylist, but I'm doing it in 25th scale.
Hey, take the win. Well, now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So then, as time went on at Revell, I was the R&D department for another 2 years, 3 years before they hired a guy to do airplanes. And so I had a secretary, and we had a librarian, and I had an administrative assistant to handle all my paperwork, so I could just work. Okay. And my job was to go around, find people who built cool cars, and say, we'd like to do a model kit of your car at Revell. Would you like to do that? And that's how it happened. So, I got to meet all of the people involved with all of the cars that we did kits of. And on some of them, like the 2930 Ford Roadster pickup truck, I worked with Harris up in Reno at the museum up there to get information on that, plus all of the other stuff. And I had to research every one of these cars. So as an example, let's say I was doing a 55 Chevy, and I wanted it to have a certain intake manifold. So I'd have to go to the company that made that intake manifold and get a real one or drawings and bring it back to the factory. Then I'd have to find the valve covers that I wanted and go to them and get a real valve cover or a drawing of the valve cover. And I had to do that with every custom part on every car. Okay. So that meant a ton of research, because Revell always made accurate models, and I wanted to make sure that the kits that I did were really, really accurate, and that they had features that AMT did not have, like opening doors, detailed interiors, roll-up windows on the sides.
But things like opening doors don't scale well because hinges are very small.
That's true, but we did it anyway, and it worked. And as soon as we did it, AMT started doing it, and Monogram started doing it.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I know you make models that are just world class in detail. But if you were going to design a kit of a car and somebody said, look, we can make the door open, but it's going to be off scale or look wrong, would you rather it look right or rather have the functioning part?
Well, it looked pretty good. The 55 Chevy was the first one we did, and it looked pretty good then, and it still looks good now. I just built one last year, and I was very pleased with it.
Monogram had a Cessna 180 that I built more times than I can
Yeah,
count.
right. Yeah,
And the doors on it were made to open, but they had these grossly oversized hinges. Now, I haven't built the
yeah,
cars you're talking
yeah.
about, so I really am out of my wheelhouse there. But I was like, my God. So I wound up sanding the thing down and puttying it up.
Right, right, right.
And
No,
then,
we made
and then
them
I
so
knocked it
they
off the
were they
table
were
and busted the
even
landing gear.
the '29 Ford pickup truck. It had opening doors, and the hinges were scale sized,
Okay.
and they worked.
Good.
Yeah,
That's
no, we did it right.
good.
When we did Thompson's Challenger, we went down to his shop, and he had this wall that was great big huge 2x4s with 2x10 shelves, not plywood, and in every one of these slots there was a Pontiac engine in it, full scale. So he had like 22 of these things in his shop there. Okay, and all of these parts laying around, and we got to spend all this time there down there with the Challenger, measuring and photographing it on several different trips. And then of course I'd see him in the car shows and stuff, and go over and talk to him. And then later on, 1965, I went up to Bonneville, and he was running a brand new Streamliner. And funny story, I drove up there from southern Utah, where I was living at the time, after I left Ravel, and I get to the Salt Flats, and I drive in and onto the Salt, and here's all the cars there are parked in a circle. Okay. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess that's where I park. Well, I was driving a VW. So I'd sold my Corvair and I had a VW. So I pulled in between one of these two cars there on this big circle of cars and started walking out to where I could see the race car. Well, shortly thereafter, a helicopter landed, and this guy jumped out of a helicopter and says, "What the crap are you doing?" Only not in those words. And it turns out they were filming a Ford commercial. They were all brand new Fords and pickup trucks.
And you crashed their party.
So I moved my
Get that Volkswagen out of here.
Yeah, I moved it over to the timing and parked it next to the timing trailer where I can't remember his name. Anyway, the timer was Petrali. So anyway, a little while later that afternoon, I took off and drove the car somewhere else. And Mickey was making a run, and the car went off the course, and the tire tracks from his race car, doing a couple of 100 miles an hour at that time, drove right over the tire tracks of where my VW had been parked. So it's always exciting at Bonneville. So,
well, since you brought up Bonneville, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I have a question about Bonneville. I recently read a book that was sent to me by a Glue Trooper about the Bonneville speed races and everything, and Art Arfons and Breedlove and all those guys.
Yeah, right.
And I guess you've met all of them.
Yes, pretty much, yeah.
And who was the one that was killed? Was it Graham, the one that was killed?
Ethel Graham, yeah. From Salt Lake City.
And Ethel apparently was really loved because he was such a nice guy. He was just out of his league.
Yeah, he was out of his league, yeah.
And but I read about the stuff that Breedlove and all just all that whole story. And if you're a Bonneville guy, I guess you're way more familiar with it than I am. Just real quick, just for the sake of everyone watching and my own edification, tell me your impression of the guys that you met, the drivers that you met, or anybody you thought was either impressive, good or bad.
They were all good, and they were all very precisely oriented in everything about their car. They wanted to know about every part on the car and how well it was and everything. I mean, and it was really cool. I had one experience out there that with Breedlove, he had the three-wheel jet car that he did 400 and some odd miles an hour with. That was when he first broke the record.
Yep.
And then he got into a thing with Arfons, and so he built a new jet car with a J79 jet engine in it. Well, the J79 jet engine powered the F-104 fighter jet.
Yeah, it was a junker that he had gotten through D-Mill that wasn't even supposed to run.
Right, exactly. So Well, Breedlove's engine was in better shape, and they designed and built the car and took it out to Bonneville. And I'm out there doing photography for a magazine at the time.
Which magazine?
And I can't remember. I wrote for several at the
Okay.
time. So Popper Hot Rodding and, a whole bunch of them. So anyway, so the crew came up to me and said, would you like to ride out to the east end of the track? The pits were on the west end, and be with us out there while we follow the car down on the course on a test run.
Is the east
And I
end
said,
where that
"I'd love
lake
to."
is at? The one that,
What's that?
Is the east end where the lake is at? The one that Breedlove wound up going into?
No, the west end is where the canal was that he went
Okay,
into.
all right.
So, yeah. So anyway, so I said, yeah. So I jumped in the station wagon along with the 8 other guys, and the station wagon had a custom-built engine in it, so it could go really fast. And we drove out to the east end of the course, and Breedlove fires up the engine, and I'm standing there taking photographs while overhead a helicopter is taking pictures of me taking pictures, and that ended up on a page in Hot Rod magazine. And so then they came over and picked me up, and we went to follow the car. Well, they had spotters down the course, 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 miles, so forth, and they were observing the car to see how it was running. It was a test run, and Breedlove's running the car, and it looks like he's up to about 200 here, and then the next mile, he's doing pretty well, 275, close to 300. Next one, it was 350 miles an hour, and we're following the car at 120 in the station wagon, okay? And salt spray coming up behind the car, and there's 9 of us in the car. So, in this big Chevy station wagon. So 350 miles, third mile, 350 miles an hour, the car's on fire. And so the crew chief driving the car, station wagon, he said, who's sitting next to the fire extinguisher? And everybody looks around, I look around, and the fire extinguisher is sitting right next to my leg.
Mm-hmm.
He says, do you know how to use it? And I said, yeah. And he says, you're the man. So Breedlove pulled the car in. He got out of the car and ran, okay? And we dropped, the station wagon dropped me and the General Electric engine technician off. The GE technician took the panel off the car, and there was flames inside, okay? I put the fire out, and I'm standing there with the fire extinguisher. Meanwhile, the engine is revving and can't be shut down. He couldn't get it turned off, and it just kept over-revving and over-revving and over-revving, louder and louder and louder. And I'm like 10 feet from the car, still holding the fire extinguisher. What I did not know was Lester Nahamkin, a famous Bonneville photographer, was taking pictures of all of this. So I didn't know any of that until just a couple of years ago. So anyway, we get the fire out, and everything's cool. Okay, so that was the end of that. So then here, about 3 years ago, about 4 years ago, I was telling a friend of mine this story, and about 2 weeks after that, I'm flipping through the internet, and I'll be darned if there's Lester Nahamkin's photograph of me putting the fire out in the car. Standing there holding with the fire extinguisher. So I've got that picture now. So
awesome.
You just don't know. At Bonneville, you can be a part of things. Even during Speed Week, I've been there walking through the pits, and some guy says, could you help me wrench on my 55 Chevy? He says, I'm here by myself. Could you give me a hand for the day? And so all of a sudden now you're a participant.
Yeah.
It's really amazing. And you get out there on the salt, and it's hot, and the cars are going fast, and every so often somebody breaks a record. I've been out there when the land speed record has been broken several times, and then I was out there one day, and they were filming the world's fastest Indian.
Yeah. I was going to ask you if you were familiar with that.
So I went over and I had some friends from Montana that were going for the ultimate land speed record that day. So I went over to the PR guy from the movie studio, and I says, is there a possibility that I could interview whomever it was that was the head guy in the movie? And I can't remember because I had a concussion 9 months ago, and so I can't remember his name. So anyway, he was playing the lead role in World's Fastest Indian.
Yeah, he's a little
So they
Hannibal
had this,
Lecter.
yeah. Anyway, so I'm over there, and he says he says just stand right here, and he walked over about 50 feet, and he was sitting on one of those movie chairs, and then all of a sudden he starts walking towards me, and all of a sudden he takes on the personality of the guy that played the cannibal in
Hannibal Lecter. That's Anthony Hopkins. He's doing
Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah,
Anthony Hopkins, and he's chattering with his face looking like
with a nice Chianti.
Yeah. Okay. That's how he came up to me. So I got to interviewing for an article, and then they said, "Would you like to watch some of the filming?" And I said, "Sure." So they had me kneel down in front of the motorcycle that was sitting on a big stand, and I'm like right in front of the front tire, looking up at him, Anthony Hopkins, while he's riding the motorcycle at speed, supposedly across the salt.
Mm-hmm.
And that particular shot is the one they used in the movie.
Ah.
And I'm like 3 feet below him watching this.
Right, now you're part of movie history.
Right there.
Well, because this is supposed to be a kit model channel, but I get very interested in the cars and stuff. But just to roll it back to models, because you and I will start gabbing and go down that hole for 4 hours.
Okay.
So, first off, why did you leave Revell?
I left Revell for a number of reasons. One of which, I was getting tired of living in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
I was tired of the traffic. And I had met a young woman up in Utah on one of my vacations. And
always a girl.
Had the whole thing there. And so we decided to get married. I asked her to marry me, and so she's going to school up in Utah, in southern Utah, and I met her up there on a vacation.
Wait a minute, let me see if I've got this right. I grew up with substandard models from Revell because you wanted to get married.
That's correct. So that was one of the reasons. So, and then the other reason was that the really cool guy that I had as a boss at Revell left the company, and they brought in Al Trendle. And Al Trendle had been with Revell for many years. He'd been over in Japan handling the company's businesses over there, and they brought him back. In fact, Royal Glazer had bought a brand new T-Bird in '63, and asked me if I would. He gave me the keys and said, "Could you go pick up Al Trendle at the airport?" So that was my first meeting with him, and he was kind of a dry guy and didn't seem to show a lot of enthusiasm and stuff. So they put him in charge of R&D, and I just he questioned me in ways that I hadn't been questioned by anybody before at the company.
I get the paradigm. You had, because of your abilities, you had been given a pretty free hand, and now all of a sudden everything's getting, why are you doing this?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I had been there for 4 years, and I still can't believe it to this day that they turned this whole thing loose and had me running it. I mean,
there were heady times, man. Well,
it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
Well, to fast forward, you started off unbelievably young and catapulted in what should have been above your head, but apparently you actually navigated it pretty well. But after you left Revell, now you're a married guy with a pregnant wife, and then the Aurora story begins because of a midnight kimchi run. So let's just fast forward to if you can say what year that was and tell folks that story. Because guys, if you wonder how you want to jump from Revell to Aurora and how he wound up speaking to Diker mano a mano, this is a story you're going to love.
Okay, well, I left Revell in '65 and moved up to Utah, and for a variety of reasons,
like you do,
and I still continue to write for the different model car magazines, and I was still very much involved in the hobby and building, and got up to Southern Utah, went to school there for about 4 months, and then I heard on the radio that a guy from Boeing was driving through Southern Utah interviewing people to hire them to go to Boeing in Seattle to build airplanes, because they had the contract to do the SST. They were doing a 747, 737, and they needed people. So I didn't contact him or see him at all. But then when my summer job ended, which was in September for the National Park Service, which is a whole different story, I talked to my wife and I said, let's go on we hadn't been on a honeymoon. I said, let's go on a honeymoon, take a couple, 3 weeks, and go to Seattle and see if we can get a job there and make money for school. Okay. And she says, oh yeah, let's do it. So we took off from Southern Utah and we trekked all the way to Seattle, taking about 6 weeks to do that. I converted my little VW Bug into a camper, which was really cool. And we camped and ate out and had fun, had a blast, got to Seattle. Within 3 days, we both had jobs. And so the guy that interviewed me in the main office there, he worked in the wind tunnel at Boeing, okay? And so at the interview, he says, well, no, not at the interview. Then when I went to work for the first day, he says, we've got this model making school starting up this week, and I'd like you to attend it. And people that graduate from it go to work in the model shop where they build the airplane models for the wind tunnel. Are you interested? And I says, absolutely. So I got involved in the course, and it was highly technical. It dealt with learning how to read blueprints, which I already knew how to do. And it learned how to work with handmade parts, which I already knew how to do, except the difference here that I was working in stainless steel and aluminum and steel with hand tools to form things, okay, make shapes. And so I got into the program, and it ends up being that I graduated from the program at the head of the class. So he calls me in the office afterwards. What happened was those that graduated from the class and did well, they went to work in the model shop to build models of the airplanes. The guys that didn't make it, they had the opportunity to stay with Boeing and go build it real full-size airplanes. Either way, cool job. So he calls me in the office and he says, you were head of the class here. And he says, I don't normally do this, but what happens is these guys that are going to go into the model shop, and he says, and that doesn't include you. And I thought, now what did I do? Another one of those moments, you know? Uh-huh. And so he says, I'm going to put you directly in the wind tunnel, the transonic wind tunnel. And we flew from 0 to 850 miles an hour in the wind tunnel. So I worked for about 9-10 months there at Boeing, working on the 747 and the SST and the Boeing 737, and also on a top secret European fighter jet. So I had a blast. It was a lot of fun. And we left there to come back to Utah to go to school, and started school in September. And then 9 months or 7 months before I was to graduate in the June of 1970, my wife was pregnant with what we thought was our second child, and it turned out to be a set of twins. So in the middle of the night, 2:30 in the morning, she wakes me up and she says, could you go get me a bottle of kimchi? Kimchi is a Chinese cabbage that's put in pots and buried for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then you eat it, supposedly.
Yeah, I learned about kimchi from the Koreans that were on my military base.
Exactly. So that was
spicy stuff too.
Go-to pregnancy food. Okay, so sure, I'll go get that for you. 2:30 in the morning. I got up, went over to the store, bought the kimchi, walked through in every store had a model department.
Yeah, guys, you got to remember this is when convenience stores and grocery stores carried models.
Yeah, that's right. So, as I left, I walked past the shelves, and I saw all these kits, the new kits and stuff, and I was still building. And so there was there, there were these brand new Aurora models on the top shelf, and there were 4 or 5 of them. And I looked at them and I thought, these guys have got to be kidding, really. I mean, okay.
They're making some weird
So
stuff back then.
yeah, so and these kits had been designed by Andy Yanchus, by the way.
Oh boy.
Okay, so I didn't know that. I didn't know Andy Yanchus at the time. I didn't know anything about it. So then I went home and I thought, in the morning this was Saturday night, and I said, on Monday morning I'm gonna call the president of the company and tell him what I think of their models. Just to do that, I had absolutely no inclination for anything else except to sound off. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Monday morning, I got on the phone. First of all, as I called the company to find out who the president was, it's Charles Diker. Then I called and found out the name of the secretary, and then I hung up. And then I decided that since his name was Charles, they probably called him Chuck. And that was a guess. Okay. But I did not know that he had just bought the company. And he was the president of the company. It was Charles Diker, but they called him Chuck. So then I called back and I got on the direct line to his secretary and bypassed the operator. And I asked, is Chuck in? She said, yes. Who's calling? I said, Jim Keeler. I also didn't know that they had dozens of new people that had started at the company. So she didn't know who I was. So I said, it's Jim Keeler, and okay, I'll get him for you. So she got him on the phone, and I says, hi, Mr. Diker. I said, my name is Jim Keeler. I'm a model builder and model kit designer, and I just wanted to call and tell you that I just saw 4 or 5 of your new kits here on the shelf, and I think they're shit. Pardon the expression there. Colloquial expression. And so he says, there was this long silence, and he says, who is this? Who's calling? And I said, it's Jim Keeler, and well, who are you? And I told him a little bit about myself, and we talked for 20 minutes. And at the end of the 20 minutes, he says, this was Monday morning, and I'm going to school. And he says, can you be in New York on Thursday? And I said, sure. Well, that meant I had to cut off my long hair. I had to shave all that stuff off. College student.
In the 70s.
1969 college student. And then I had to buy a suit. I didn't have a suit. I had to buy a white shirt, a tie, shoes, and socks. And I mean, the whole routine. Okay. And I got all gussied up. And then for 3 days, I wrote a group of what I call product profiles. And they were proposals for kits that Aurora could make. Okay. So then I jump on the plane on Wednesday afternoon, fly back to New York, get there, go to the hotel. I heard they had a really good roast duckling on Long Island, so I wanted a roast duckling. And they served me the whole duck, so I ate the whole duck. So the next morning I take a cab over to the office, and they take me upstairs and introduce me to Charles Diker. We talked for half an hour, 45 minutes, and then he says, I'd like you to go over to the R&D department, and blah, blah, blah. So somebody came and escorted me over to the R&D department, which is a block away in a separate building. And I went down there and I met the people in R&D, including the guy, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name because of my concussion, who was the guy that invented plastic model car kits for Gallant and Gallant.
Oh, and Derek Brand.
And he was now working for Aurora.
Okay.
So I met him and I thought, oh, wow, this is cool. And I met Andy, and they were working on a new slot racing car to succeed the model motoring cars, to be the next in line of model motoring cars.
Uh-huh.
And I had slot racing experience at Revell, which is one reason I left the company. Okay. And so I looked at it and waited for the discussion. They asked my opinion, and I told them, and we made 3 major changes to it. One of which was to lengthen the wheelbase and give it 3 different wheelbases so we could do different styles of bodies on it. And the other one was to eliminate the 2 screws to hold the body to the car, the chassis to the car. And I showed a sketch of a snap together for the body, so we took that off, saved some money. And then I made a change on the armature of the car. And that eventually became the AFX. So I met Andy Yanchus, and of course, little while later, he says, "So my kits were shit, huh?"
Sorry, Andy. It is what it is.
So Andy commented on that several times over the next 5 years.
As he was prone to do.
So
But how long did you wind up working at Aurora?
Go ahead.
How long did you work at Aurora?
I was there about 5 years.
Okay. You and Andy probably left about the same time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he left shortly after I did.
Because I know it went downhill there. You kind of caught the tail end.
Yeah, he did. But so anyway, they gave me a check for $5,000. They paid me $500 a month to finish school, and every 2 to 3 weeks I would fly back to New York from Utah and spend 2 days going over stuff for projects.
Great.
And then they also hired me as product manager of hobby kits to run the program, and that was cool, and it meant a lot of money, which was great. And then in June, we packed everything up and put it on the truck and moved to New York. And 6 weeks after I arrived there, the guy that was running the model motoring program, he left the company. So now they came to me and they said, "Now you're now project manager or product manager of the slot racing too." So I had 2 hats to wear, and eventually I ended up changing the model motoring name to AFX, and the vice president of the company called me in the office one day and chewed my butt off and said, "This is the most valuable brand in the hobby business, and you're the model motoring." And he says, "And you're going to shut it down?" And I says, "No, I'm going to make it better. I'm going to call it AFX, and I'm going to sell a lot of cars, a lot of sets." And so we went from 6.5 million to the next year was 20 million.
Well, that is impressive. But how did you manage to pull it off? Because I know in '65, slot cars took a big dump and crippled quite a few of the kit model companies that were involved in it.
Well, it did in the larger scales.
Ah.
It did in the larger scales.
So what scales were selling?
Well, AFX cars were supposedly HO scale. They weren't. They were 1/64th scale. But that's what they called them, was HO scale, and they still do.
Yeah, my brother had the AFX in 1/64. I remember that's what we had in our house. I used to,
exactly.
I was trigger happy, so of course I catapulted them off every curve right into the wall. Man, puppies will fly!
Yeah, which every kid did. So one of the first things that I did there after they gave me that job was I said, I want to fly around to 3 or 4 cities in the country and have the sales manager of that area take me to 2 or 3 hobby shops on a Saturday where I can interview kids. So I did that over a period of about 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
And went all over the country and interviewed these kids. And I found out these, 9, 10, 12-year-old kids, they all had 100 models of AFX cars, slot racing cars. So, I decided the thing we've got to do most of all is make a lot of cars. And we're going to make these cars better than they have ever been. So the detail was really important. So I flew to L.A., to Art Center School of Design in Los Angeles, where I had attended while I was working at Revell. And I went in and I hired a guy who lived from back east to design our cars. And so he flew back and took the job and was really happy, and I was really happy. And so he did that, and then we had so much work. I flew out again in about 6 months and hired another guy too. So I had 2 stylists working for me there, and there were 22 of us in the R&D group in that building, and about half of them were under my direction. And so we did the R&D work on the cars, and first thing I did was I changed the track from these locking pins that they had, which were a real bugger to do, and I changed over to slot rate to snap together track. And so
I think we had the one with the pins. I seem to remember being a real pain. They broke easily.
Yeah, so we redesigned them, and then they didn't break as easy, and they've been successful ever since. So. And the sales of this stuff just kept going up, the whole time I was there.
But Diker wanted to get into games instead.
Well, he wanted the company to be a game company. And in fact, the first day he started there on a Sunday, he said, we're not going to be making hobby kits anymore.
Ugh.
You know,
Heretic,
that
heresy,
was
infidel.
the infidel. So last year, or no, this year, I called him on the phone.
You called Diker this year?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Oh, this I did not know.
What?
I did. I must hear what happened because he's got to be. He's about your age, a little older, maybe.
He's about 10 years older than I am. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh no, he's about my. Yeah, he's actually about my same age, actually.
Okay.
So I called him on the phone and I just asked him a lot of questions about stuff, and then I told him, I says, just if you had spent the money on hobby kits that you spent on all of the ill-fated games, I said, Aurora, with my direction and others, we could have surpassed Revell in terms of the number of kits and the quality of kits. And there was a big dead silence on the phone on the other end. So, but I did talk to him about it. So
I think he knows. And oh well, it was the history wrote itself. But I didn't realize.
Yeah, he just ran it into the ground. I mean, as simple as that.
Even Andy was adamant they could either Aurora could have been the biggest model company out there.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, they would have up their game, but they had the basic infrastructure. Well, Jim, I want to ask another question and roll the clock back, get back in the Wayback Machine where we started from. Fran's on board with us, and he collects a lot of the vintage wooden models from the 40s. And
oh, really?
And I've seen his work. He does beautiful. He puts them together, and he paints some of them leaves in natural wood. And a lot of the military stuff like the Sherman tank and the Weasel and these tracked vehicles with wooden link tracks, and I know that's back when you got into models that were made of wood. Did you ever build anything like that, or was your stuff just here's the block of wood?
Well, I started to build model cars out of wood, when I was like 8 or 9 years old, but I really couldn't do it. I had a pocket knife and I was trying to whittle them out with a pocket knife, and it just didn't work. So I gave up on that quite early. And then, of course, when I did Fisher Body Craftsman's Guild, that was all carved out of wood. Plus, I had to carve things out of aluminum for bumpers and stuff like that,
Like you do. Because every home should have an aluminum shaving kit.
Exactly. That's true. Yeah, right.
By the way, as a side note, I talked to Tom Daniel a while back. TD, although not the year that we would have been entered, but he actually was a judge for that for 2 years. He was shocked there were like 4,000 cars. I mean, the turnout was under. If you did if you did that with kids today, you'd be lucky to get 400.
The Revell contest, we had 10,000 cars.
Jesus. Those were the days.
10,000 cars, and we had a month to judge them in. Bob Paith and I. And we were busy.
Well, I tell you what I'm going to do here. I'm going to call Steve at Steve's Model Mania. You know Steve.
Yes, sir.
And see if I can chime him in on this call. Let me see. Let's see. So you two can chat because I'm going to have to take a quick commercial break, but that way you two can, let me just find the phone here. Contacts. It's not like I don't use this every day. And let's hit the call button. See if I can merge the calls successfully. Does not always happen. You might get cut out for a second.
Hi, it's the bathroom report.
It's trying to merge the calls.
Okay.
All right.
Hello.
We are on with Steve of Steve's Model Mania and Jim Keeler.
Hi, guys. It's the bathroom refreshment stand-in.
Now, I will put another picture up here so they don't have to see an empty chair. And you two guys I'm going to hand off the con. This is part of Steve's screen test because he and Ken will be taking over the show when I'm not available.
Oh, okay.
So that we can keep it on air. And you guys...
Isn't that frightening?
And you guys have it all.
Kind of frightening.
Well, okay. So, Jim, I know that when you first went to L.A. to work for Revell, you actually lived with Ed Roth. Is that not correct?
That's correct. Yeah, when I was 18 years old, and I I told Ed, I said, I'm scared to death of moving to LA. I've never had an apartment, never lived alone. I'd just been living with my dad until then. And he says, well, don't worry about that. He says, just come and live with me and my family. So for 6 weeks I did.
That was very generous of him. I mean,
it was
very
generous. Yeah, it really was. Yeah.
And what kind of a guy was he actually? Because everybody has this perception of him from seeing the theater of him being, Big Daddy. But what was he really like?
He had a public persona and a private persona, and I knew Ed on both. But he and I would have philosophical discussions about the industry, cars and models. And we would talk about all kinds of stuff. And I would go and hang at his shop, and, sometimes we'd jump in the Outlaw and go for a drive.
That had to be amazing.
Well, at one time, I even got a ride in a Beatnik Bandit. We had to have the bubble top up, but we did both squeeze in it, and just went out on the street, did a little ways down, turned around, and came back. But I got to ride in it.
Meanwhile, how did he get the name Big Daddy?
He got the name Big Daddy when he came on board at Revell. And Henry Blankford was the public relations guy at Revell. And he told Ed, he says, there's a couple things we need to do. He says, first of all, we need to improve your public appearance. So he sent him out and had a custom suit made and a top hat made. And he says, this is what I want you to wear from now on in public. So that came. And then the other thing is that I want everybody to call you Ed Big Daddy Roth. So he was the one that started that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So
Henry Blankford. Yeah.
Now he and George Barris really had sort of an adversarial relationship.
Yes, they did. Very much so. Yeah.
And was that just strictly competitive, or
it was strictly competitive. It wasn't personal. No, it was never personal. No. And I knew both of them, and I worked and I did things with both of them. I knew Barris, and Barris, whenever I run into him anywhere in the country, he always knew my name and asked how I was doing.
Yeah, George was always a sociable guy. I mean, as you know, I knew him from when I worked at AMT, and I've also known him from being part of the AutoZine, which was his cars on the East Coast. Yeah, and the guys who did the shows. So he was an interesting character, as all these guys are. I mean, they have a whole
they all were
persona that's bigger than life.
Yeah, they all did. Yeah.
Now, is it true? You talk about the Challenger and you talk about Mickey Thompson. Is the story true that he basically laid out the frame in chalk on the floor of his shop?
Yes, that's true.
That's really amazing. That here's a car that was built to go 400 miles an hour plus, and they kind of drew it on the floor in chalk.
He did. They drew it on the floor, and then they cut up the pipes and laid them all out and welded them all together. And then from there, they built the sides up, and they had angled sides on it to make room for the engines and the exhaust manifolds. It was amazing.
That is the essence of Southern California hot rodding.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, people don't understand fully that hot rodding was really born from the guys who came back from the war and chose to stay on the West Coast and learn skills in the services.
That's correct, yeah.
And they loved cars, and they were able to fly that.
Ed Roth included, yeah.
Yeah. It was amazing. When Roth built his cars, and I understand a lot of them, he rough built in plaster before he laid down the glass.
Well, what he did was fiberglass was brand new. The only car that had been made with it up to that point in time, actually there were two. One was the Corvette, and the other one was the Mercury concept car that was built in 1953 by Ford. And so those were the first two that I know of that were built of fiberglass. And so Ed heard about it, and it's a lot easier to build out of fiberglass than metal. So this was perfect for Ed. But what he did was he took seriously. He took hundreds and thousands of pounds of plaster, mixed it all up, and made a great big pile, roughly the shape that he wanted. And when I say roughly, he threw this stuff down with his hands and patted it in place, okay? And then he would and let it dry for a couple of weeks. Then he would take a grinder and he would grind it all down to the shape and sand it smooth of the shape of the body that he wanted. And then what people normally would have done then is make a mold of that out of fiberglass. And then take that mold and lay up fiberglass inside of that to make your body. But no, Ed didn't do things that way. So then he would take the fiberglass and just lay it down on top of the plaster.
And would he leave the plaster underneath it, or would he crack the plaster out?
And then he would trash the plaster out from inside. Yeah, turn it over, and with a hammer and chisel and everything else he could find, he'd break it all up in pieces and pull it out, and voila, there was his body. Yeah.
Well, I've seen RC modelers that do that. They shape the model out of a foam. Then they lay the fiberglass over. When the fiberglass hardens, they melt out the foam.
Melt the foam out. Yeah, right.
And they made some beautiful work.
Yeah, that works too. So no, that's how he did it, and he did that with but on the Outlaw, what he did is after he had the body built, or not totally built, but finished, just the body itself, then he made fiberglass molds of that, and he was selling Outlaw bodies in Rod and Custom. Yeah.
But
right.
Jim, how does Ed go from doing this to making like Ratfink and kit models?
Well, the Ratfink came along in 1962, and I just read something here on Facebook 3 or 4 weeks ago, and somebody was asking the question about the Lindbergh models, and so they're monster models. And so what happened there was we were doing cars, we were doing the Outlaw, and then we were going to do the Beatnik Bandit, and I'm working on this stuff at Revell, and I had been there, started working there in April, and that next January, the company went to the Toy and Hobby Show. First toy show in New York City, and then to the Hobby Show, which was held in Chicago. And that's where Lindbergh, where the company saw Lindbergh's Weirdos. They made the Weirdos based on Ed Roth's cars, but on Ed Roth's monsters, but they designed their own monsters. And then they called them the Weirdos. So I get a phone call from Royal Glazer, vice president of the company, from the Hobby Show the morning that she first saw them, and she says, okay, take all the Ed Roth monsters and make kits.
Okay.
And so we went ahead and that's when I started designing all the Roth kits of monsters. And we had a sculptor there. His name was Henry Plummer. And he was just an amazingly fun person to be with. And he was so incredibly good. But I had to work with him to develop the models so they could be manufactured. So I had to work with him to get draft angles and that kind of stuff to make sure that we could pull the parts out of the molds. And so I had to do all of that detail work on those kits with Henry, and that was as important as him actually sculpting them. So we went on to do them.
Weren't the Weirdos kits Hawks?
Maybe they were Hawks. They were Hawks. They weren't Lindberghs.
Oh, okay.
Memory fails me.
That's okay. Yeah. Mine does all the time.
Well, it's a testament to Ed that they're still making these things.
Yeah, they brought them back.
Yes.
And so it's funny. I went to Model Palooza recently. Bumped into a bunch of just wonderful people. Everyone I met there was wonderful. I never even went to one of these model shows until about 2 years ago, and I love them because the people are so cool. And every one of them I've been to has at least has one Ratfink or some Ed Roth design on the table.
Yeah, yeah.
And I haven't even
No,
seen
we have
I haven't even seen
we have all the
Godzilla at
tooling.
every show.
We have all the tooling at Atlantis, and we're going to be doing them.
Well, as long as you brought up Atlantis, is there anything that you can tell us that would not be a violation of something proprietary?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. The next they came to me last spring, a year ago, last April, March, whatever it was, and told me that they had bought all of the Revell tooling, which I already knew, and that they wanted me to take the stuff, all the custom car parts tooling that I had done 62 years ago, and to make new kits out of them. And they wanted to call them Keeler's Customs. I'm going, oh, that's cool. So I said yes. And so the first one that I did was the Moon Ice, but the license for that had to be paid to Moon Ice in Japan. So they didn't put my name on the box. So then the next one was going to be the Yellow Fever Fiat.
I've got that one.
And so that's all made up of what I've done is I've taken all of the existing Revell custom car parts tools, and most of them still exist. Unfortunately, the motorcycle kits were probably destroyed by Monogram, the great destroyer of tooling. And yeah, exactly.
We refer to it as dealing permanently with the competition.
Yes, I am, and I'm going to be frankly dealing with the competition. And so I I'm going to call a spade a spade. So anyway, I said absolutely. So I did the Fiat. The next one will be the Studebaker, 53 Studebaker, and that's a rework of the Revell kit, what they call the funny car. It's really a gasser, not a funny car. And that was designed by Bob
Can you
Hayes,
tell us what the
Revell.
hold on, real quick, for us not so well educated automotive guys, define a gasser versus a funny car.
A gasser is almost any kind of car that you put a high performance engine in it, special rear axle, and special tires and wheels, customize it a lot or not, and put it on the track and try to go like stink. Funny cars are a class, and they all have to work within the rules of the NHRA.
So there's a formula on funny cars.
Yeah, the gassers can be almost anything.
Okay, gotcha.
I mean, you can have a 53 Studebaker gasser, and you can have an Austin Healey gasser.
Okay, all right.
But a funny car is generally a stock-bodied car that has a short wheelbase on it to give more traction. And that's how the name came about, is because the first one I saw was the rear wheels had been moved forward about 2 feet on this Dodge. And I looked at that and I said, man, that sure looks funny.
Yeah, they were altered wheelbase stock cars, and they looked funny. That's how the funny name came.
Exactly how the name came about, yeah. Right.
And then they went to flip-up bodies and nitromethane engines and superchargers, and you know, it's a whole.
Now they all use basically the same body or bodies similar to each other, but it's its own separate class, and they still have gassers.
And the bodies do not represent the car that they are supposed to.
No, not at all. No. So, but no, it's still it's a drag racing category, and so anyway, the next one will be the 53 Studebaker gasser, and that'll have a blown Chrysler engine in it, plus a complete separate engine. So it has 2 engines in it, and it'll have scale ignition wiring included, and decals that will be for a gasser, and there's also a separate set of decals that will be in there for a Bonneville's 53 Studebaker Bonneville car, which you can use those decals if you want to customize it yourself into a Bonneville car.
Well, Jim, real quick on your Yellow Fever, because I have one in the box. Of course, you know I'm moving, so it's over in the new house. Yeah. One of our glue troopers, Bruce, the Mystic Modeler ships, had built one for one of our viewers' builds. Did a great job on it. But everyone's commented that there's enough parts in there if you had 2 more bodies to make 3 cars, 2 complete engines. So what's the story on that?
That's correct. Yeah, and here's why: is because when I did the custom car parts kits at Revell, initially we did 20, and before we were through with them, we had done 39, and there were a dozen more in the works that were canceled because they spent the money on slot racing, and then 2 years later lost it all. So what we did is there was a competition car parts kit that was used for making chassis and running gear for competition cars. And there was also a custom car parts chassis kit that was used to be making street rods and custom cars. And what has happened is that the tooling for the competition car parts was destroyed by Monogram, apparently, the great destroyer of model kits tooling. And so we had to use the custom car parts one. But either one of those kits would provide you with the parts to build up to 3 cars. And that was the whole reason behind the custom car parts kit, was you could use those things, all the different ones we made, to do all kinds of things. And they were all interchangeable. Everything had to match up with the next kit, the next kit, the next kit.
Well, my tentative plan is to, because I want to build both engines, is to build the Topo with no engine in it, with or maybe one in the car or one on a block and the other one on a hoist, like they're doing an engine swap. Because I can't just leave like one in the box. I got to build it.
Yeah, exactly right. And so, if you've got another car, an AMT car kit or MPC kit or something, and you want an extra engine, bam, pick it up and put it in there. So then, go ahead.
Every great play has an encore. And the custom car parts play, the best encore, which I think you ever did, was at Aurora when you did the garage scene kits.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, I forgot you'd done those.
They were fantastic kits.
They were the best, the most detailed model car kits made by anybody ever. There has not been anything done better than that, or as well as that was done. And we did those at Aurora, and we actually had 2 other chassis that we were going to do, and we had several other bodies, and we also had all of the patterns made for a 426 Hemi. So we would have had 4 different engine kits that you could put together.
I mean, I had those when I was younger, when they first came out, and they were just fantastic. I mean, that was like having your own speed shop in a box.
It was. That was the whole intention, yeah. And you could build dioramas with them. You could do all kinds of things with them. So, but getting back to the Keeler's Customs kits, the Studebaker's next, and I have 10 other kits made from old Revell tooling that are going to be up and coming over the next year. And so those are actually in work right now. And we'll be doing brand new decal sheets for them. They'll all have their own box. The boxes will have, one of them will be a 23T Roadster, and it'll be pictured at the Dream Cruise car show thing. Yeah, at Woodward, yeah, exactly. On Woodward Avenue with a banner and stuff in the box art. And the competition cars that we're going to do will be based at various drag strips around the country with the artwork of that drag strip included on the box art, like we just did with the Lions drag strip. Was my favorite drag strip to go to, and that's why I did the Yellow Fever at Lions. Yeah.
Well, Jim, I'm going to call up Ken in a little while. We'll be shifting over to model airplanes and stuff, but before I let you run, and we'll probably be doing this again sometime if you'd like to, I have a question for you. It's a kind of put you on the spot question I love. And by the way, Steve, this question applies to you too. What is your favorite kit model car?
My favorite kit model car kit?
Yeah.
It's actually 2 or 3. all of them done by Johan.
Yeah.
And number one is the Chrysler Turbine car.
Absolutely.
Number two are their two classic cars that they did, the Cadillac.
Going with the 31 Cadillac?
Yeah.
I just built that one a while back. It was fantastic. My first Johan kit. Incredible.
Yeah. And I was going to mention something. I was watching the Battle of Britain earlier, and in one scene, this guy pulls up in this little single-seat roadster, and on the hood, on the radiator, is an elephant hood ornament. It was a Bugatti.
Is that what he's? That's the scene where he talks about going to train new pilots. You got to earn that new rank. He goes, got pilots with down on their cheek. Yeah. Is that the scene you're talking about?
That's the one I'm talking about. Yeah.
I didn't realize that was a Bugatti because he pulls up to his wife and he tells you, "Oh my gosh." Okay, all right, Keeler. Since you brought it up, we have to talk about the Battle of Britain.
Okay, you're on. You're on. Yeah. Great movie.
By the way, guys, just FYI, Jim and I talked about this a little earlier today. You may recall I actually did a documentary on the making of the Battle of Britain, which 2 movies.
I don't get to name my 3 cars.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Steve is absolutely correct. Steve, your 3 cars.
I agree with Jim. The number 1 car kit ever has got to be the Johan Turbine car. Because
now I've got to get one of those.
Fantastic. My second favorite car kit would be the DB5 by Airfix from 1965.
Not the one by Eagle Moss?
What?
Wasn't Eagle Moss the one you had all the problems with?
What's that?
Wasn't it? I said not by Eagle Moss. Isn't the Eagle Moss kit the one you had all the problems with?
Yeah, but I'm talking about the 24 scale plastic one.
I know. I was just being snarky.
Yeah. And my third favorite one would probably be a dual kit. It would be the Mongoose and Snake Funny cars.
That wouldn't be a play to get Atlantis to put them back in production, would it?
Well, it's been a discussion. But anyway.
Okay.
And my fourth alternate kit of range would be when Monogram did the Pro Stock cars in the 80s.
Okay. Well, you guys know I'm not the biggest car builder, but my number 1 favorite was Ken gave me years ago, and I still have it, gave me I believe it was a Tamiya Willis Jeep, the World War II Willis MB. That was the finest Jeep model kit I'd ever built. Then I built the MPC Repop, where they have the Paper Godzilla with the 106 recoilless Jeep, which is just their old Jeep remarketed. Another excellent kit. So 2 Jeeps, and the third one, because I built it recently, is that there is a Johan 31 Cadillac. I'd never built a Johan kit before. I was flabbergasted how well everything fit.
It just, you could pull it out of the box and it would assemble itself.
You can shake the box and it come out assembled.
And if I wanted to throw in fiddly kits, it would be the
IMC. I knew it.
Yeah, it would be the IMC Ford GT and then the Ford GT40.
And I understand Fujimi's the same way with the fiddly parts, an insane level of detail. Well,
and I agree with him on those 2 kits as well. Yeah.
Well, guys, I'm going to try and call.
And the 48 Ford would be included in that as well.
Yeah. Well, then testers came back with them as those fabulous Fords.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah. Okay. Real quick, I'm gonna be super fast, and then I'm gonna try and ring Ken in, see if we can get 4 people on the line without my phone melting down. But making of the Battle of Britain, which I did a documentary on, and Jim and I were talking about earlier. Now, of course, this is all before the days of CGI and special. The few special effects they did try didn't work so well, like when the Messerschmitt catches fire and explodes, and you can tell it's almost magic markered in. But there was a British, I want to say he was an Air Vice Marshal. He was a World War II hero, and I believe his name was Mahadi. And I'm sure all the people in the UK who are watching right now are burning up the keyboards correcting me. But he was the Airplane Wrangler. And there was also for the movie. And he was a World War, of course, a Battle of Britain veteran and everything. And there was also an American who just passed away recently in his very late 80s, Connie. Oh crap! I had his name in my head a minute ago. But anyway, he was one of the aerial coordinators. Now, I'm just going to give you guys a super quick rundown. They were not actually Broccoli, but by the way, it's the same guy that made the James Bond movies. They were not out to make the Battle of Britain. They were out to make a movie about was it Ward Wingate? Wingate, Lord Wingate, Ward Wingate. The guy Ord Wingate, the guy who'd been in charge of the Chindits. They were out to make a movie about him. They've been in negotiations with the family, and they had a $3 million budget. And you got to remember, we're talking about $1968. Okay. And they were going to make a movie about Ord Wingate, so that would about $30 million today, or actually more like $45 million. Anyway, the money was allocated, and the last minute the family pulled out. And I think it was Cubby Broccoli, the guy who did the James Bond movies, who, by the way, flew hurricanes in World War II, okay, which I didn't know until I read this book.
Wow.
And he was dejected. I've got $3 million or £3 million to make a movie, and the family said no, and now I've got no movie. What the hell am I going to do? And he's out standing by his car, and he looks up, and a hurricane and a Spitfire fly over in formation.
Oh my gosh.
Turns out they were practicing for the annual Battle of Britain celebration, or the Queen's Jubilee, whatever, when she comes out. And he goes,
Queen's Jubilee.
And he goes, well, I thought the Battle of Britain, that'd make a pretty interesting movie. I could make that. And he's like, I could make that for $3 million. Oh my God. By the way, in the end, the budget was $13 million. So he gets up with his old buddy Mahattie, and they start, what are we going to do? Well, he had no idea what a landmine he just stepped on. So he pitches it to the guys. Ord Wingate's story is out, the Battle of Britain. And of course, this is in England. So any British movie company is like, well, we'd love to make a movie about the most famous battle fought over our skies that all of us lived through. Okay?
That's right.
Which is why the Battle of Britain, the movie, almost qualifies as a docudrama. Okay? All of the people above the rank of general are real characters. All the people below the rank of general are composites. Like the German Luftwaffe Major Falke is clearly Adolf Galland. That's why he tells Harry, Goering, give me what I can give you anything. What do you need? Give me, equip my squadron with Spitfires. And Galland did say that. Well, anyway. So he sets off to do this, not realizing what a quagmire he's jumped into. Turns out, as the fates, because God alone wanted this movie made. Because as the fates would have it, there were a handful of Spitfires and one working Hurricane in England. No, he was shocked to learn there was not a single operational Messerschmitt, Heinkel, or Dornier, or Focke-Wulf anywhere in the world. But, and there's always a but, the Spanish had made the airplanes after the war on license with British engines, which is why the whole front end of the Bouchons look wrong. But the point being that it turned out a bunch of Americans, and it's always us Americans, were over there buying these airplanes from the Spanish for the Confederate Air Force, which is now the commemorative Air Force because Confederate's no longer acceptable. Anyway, so Connie Edwards? Was it Connie Edwards? Was over there with 4 other guys, all Texans, all oil money, plenty of money to burn, and they were going to buy some of these flying airplanes from the Spanish. And Connie, to his credit, being a huge aviation buff with a lot of money, had flown everything. Mustangs, Spitfires, Messerschmitts, the works. And the story about their acquiring the airplanes from the Spanish is an hour-long discussion in its own right. The skullduggery, the backstabbing, the conniving that took place. In the end, they got the Spanish Air Force to give them 30 Heinkels and about and the Messerschmitts or the Messerschmitt copies were all sold as scrap, junk, or surplus, but the Heinkel 111s were still operational Spanish bombers, and they got the Spanish Air Force to use Spanish Air Force pilots in active duty Spanish aircraft to fly for the movie for the cost of basically feeding them in fuel. It was a coup of unbelievable proportion. And this was a time when Spain and England were having some political issues. So, a long story compressed into a very tight 10 seconds. They found a Hurricane flying that was being restored in Canada. They got a handful of Hurricanes together, about a dozen Spitfires, some of which were post-war models that they modified to look like, including putting a turtle deck on a bubble top. I mean, they were pulling every trick they could find, but they managed to get about, I think it was 18 operational Spitfires, 3 or 4 operational Hurricanes, which of course they use over and over and over again. They use matte footage to make fake squadrons, and 30 bombers and about 18 Messerschmitts, largely flown by the Spanish. It was just amazing. The logistics were harder than the real battle.
But so the moral of the story is, once again, the Americans bailed out the British.
Kind of, sort of. And the Americans being well, hold on. You're going to love this part. You guys are just going to absolutely love this part. The Americans, since they were flying all the Messerschmitt fighters, the Americans insisted on romping around in Luftwaffe uniforms. Cause America. Unfortunately, there is one sad little side note. Spanish pilots were ferrying the airplanes over to England for the filming, and nobody knows what happened, but one of the Messerschmitt pilots, Spanish, crashed on the way and was killed. They think he was probably screwing around doing aerobatics on his own, but he was crashed and was killed. But I got to tell one other super quick story, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Ken, I swear to God, we're going to get to you. Adolf Galland, the famous World War II ace, and the youngest general in the Luftwaffe, at like 34 years of age, was the technical advisor. He technically advised the German side, made sure the uniform's correct, that sort of stuff. Stanford Tuck, one of many British aces that was a technical advisor for the movie, and a personal good friend of Adolf Galland. After the war, they were besties. The two of them were on set, and the Spanish found that the ME-109 was way too squirrely. They needed a two-seater, and since they built them on license, they engineered their own two-seat model, the only one in the world, and it's still flying today. And so they had a two-seat Spanish copy of the BF-109 with a Hispanic Suiza engine, which is a copy of the Merlin, right? So
Galland went up in it.
Everybody up to speed. So Galland and Stanford Tuck, and it seems to be debated today whether or not they had any permission to do this, saunter over to the two-seater, hop in, fire that bad boy up. Galland had not been at the controls of a BF-109 in 25 years. They blast off and start doing low-altitude aerobatics over the set, with Galland at the controls, with Stanford Tuck in the back seat, laughing his merry ass off. And apparently, at one point, it wasn't enough to do slow rolls at low altitude. Galland comes over, if you want to believe the story, it's in the book, and remember, it's an injected engine, so it can fly inverted, and comes over at prop height inverted and flies over the airfield. And everybody's like, even the guys who are actively flying the airplanes are saying, like, that is the smoothest flying I have ever seen. And he lands, and they hop out, drenched in sweat, and of course Galland promptly shoving a cigar in his mouth because he was an inveterate cigar smoker. And they walk off arm in arm, and I think Galland forgot and started speaking in German. And it was just one of those moments in history.
Wow.
Anyway, so Jim, I'm going to see if I can get Ken to join us.
Okay.
And
well, I met Galland.
You did talk about that.
And it was I believe it was a Hill Air Force Base in Utah,
I can't remember for sure. Maybe
Which is a great Air Force base with a wonderful museum.
Oh, they have an incredible museum there. But anyway, they had the event, and I went up, and because I wanted to meet this guy, and I not only got the chance to see him, but actually got a chance to shake hands with him and talk with him. And it was really cool. He was just a real gentleman, you know. So.
Okay, let's see if I can get Ken on board. You guys may get cut out for a second. I'm not sure how this is going to work. I never tried doing it with four of us.
Hola.
Okay, hold on. I'm trying to merge. Merging conference call. 3, 2. Hey, it worked.
Of course it worked.
Good night, Ken.
Yeah, I know. I got 3 minutes. Wow.
No, guys. We've been off air for 2 weeks. We're not abiding by the 2-hour rule.
Uh-oh.
Oh, this could be interesting.
I did not run that by high command, so hopefully I will not catch flack for that. But if I do, I'm a man.
Well, you got another house to go to now, in case.
Okay, let's not even go there. You know, she watches this show now. Okay, guys. And if I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but I am about to fit to screen here. Transform, fit to screen. Ken, I am showing a picture of the P-38. Guys, everybody, a lot of people asked if Ken had made any progress on the P-38. I hadn't thought to ask him. Hadn't thought it to ask him. Yeah, proper English. Thoughted. This, I don't know if you guys are watching the live stream or if you're just on the phone, but Ken, I'm showing a picture of the P-38, and I had no idea you had gotten this far along with it.
Those are 18-inch tiles, by the way.
Yeah. So, guys, I'm going to let Ken talk about the P-38 for a second. This is a 3D printed radio control model kit.
Oh, wow.
And it came. I got it from Bruce, the Mystic Modeler Ships, and it was just a box of parts and a book of instructions. And Ken has done this with it. So, Ken, I hand the speaking token over to you.
Really?
Take it and run because it won't last.
I know these things expire quickly if I don't start talking. Yeah. I guess a few months ago, you all remember when Max gave me this thing, and I was pulling pieces out and looking at it. I was pretty impressed with how well it was engineered. The insides of these things look like maybe copies of the original aircraft, the way they were designed. The whole thing went together fairly well. Unfortunately, I don't know if I warped them or they came to warped, but some of the parts had shrank a little bit. If you look at the trailing edge of the outer wing panel, just beyond the boom on the right-hand side, you'll see a little bit of a gap there. And that's because it slightly shrunk back up and didn't quite meet. But fortunately, that's not a high-stress area, so I'm not too worried about it. It has an 1,100 millimeter wingspan, in case anybody's wondering.
What's that in American measurements?
I've been told it's about 40 inches. Whoa. So as far as a kit model goes, it's enormous. As far as an RC airplane goes,
wait a minute. 40 inches. Size. You said those are 18-inch tiles?
Yeah, those are 18-inch tiles.
30, yeah, okay. It looks a little more than 40, but okay.
Yeah, 41.
42.
Whatever it takes.
Okay.
It. I haven't put the elevator on it, and I haven't put the rudders on it yet. The flaps are in the center wing section. You can't see those, but I haven't put those on yet either. This is a pretty sophisticated model. I was pretty surprised. The motor mounts that came with it are essentially square blocks, but they're designed for a very specific motor, so I have to make those out of wood for electric motors. And the battery goes in the center section. That part from just behind the guns, you see a gap there, all the way back behind the canopy. That all slides out, and that gives me access to the battery and to the nose steering servo, and that's where the receiver will also go.
Now
It
the
has,
wing is not. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's got mechanical retracts, which I just bent the wire for today at the train museum. They have they had a vise there. I don't have one, so I went down there today and I banged out the 3 wire forms that I needed. It comes with the kit comes with a form that you're supposed to bang this wire out to. So I got it pretty close. The tires are still on their way from China. And there's a few other pieces I still need.
What train museum?
It's called SFRM. It's the
South Florida.
Yeah, it's in South Florida. SFRM. It's in the Deerfield Amtrak train station.
Huh. I restored.
Fly it into a train.
I restored a 1903 Pullman car, a wooden Pullman car that was built for the Oregon Short Line Railroad in 1903, and it was used till 1935, and then taken up to Montana to be used as a fishing cottage. And then I came along in 1986, and everything that was in the car when it left the factory and the railroad was still in the car, and I was asked to restore it. It took me 3 years.
Wow, that's a huge project. Those things are money pits like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, it was a big money pit. We did kind of a cosmetic restoration on it. It can't go on the rails again, but it's a museum piece in the hotel area.
I'm sorry, could you find new trucks for it?
We found new trucks the day the news came. The day that we were lowering it down on the steel support chassis, because we were moving ahead with it, and if we had had that information 2 weeks before, we would have had them delivered from LA up there and put them on trucks. But we had to get this thing inside this building for this new hotel, so we just went ahead and put it on a monstrous steel framework that I designed. Great big steel I-beams. And it's in Yellowstone, right next to Yellowstone Park, and so every week we would have 3.5 earthquakes, so I had things so it wouldn't shake the car too bad. But that's another story. Anyway, let's get back to your story about the airplane.
Yeah, that's a whole episode in itself, doing one of those things. Anyway, I'm debating whether or not to paint this thing. What you see right there, all by itself, weighs 2.2 pounds, near as I can tell.
Well, what would be the problem with painting it?
Adds weight.
How much?
Yeah.
I mean, it's on the heavy side now as it is for an airplane.
Put a bigger motor in.
There you go. See, simple. Problem solved.
Like, I'm a hot rodder, so put a bigger motor in.
True, a bigger motor.
Put jets in.
The problem with a bigger motor is then you got to fly faster in order to gain enough lift to pick the thing up, and then then you got to land it going faster. Otherwise, you stall it, and bad things happen when you do that.
Yes, I've noticed that out at the airfield.
That's
why I ended up building cars, is because when I started out building model airplanes, I'd fly them and they'd crash, and I thought, this is ridiculous. I built model cars, I just put them on the shelf.
Well, when I first started flying many years ago,
oh God, here we go.
I had just crashed an airplane, and one of the guys at the flying field said,
okay, guys, he's talking about a model airplane, okay?
Yes, radio control airplane.
Well, you said when I started flying, for all they know, you're flying in a Piper Cherokee.
Well, I do fly real planes too, not as big as Max does, but this was a model plane. And I was standing there over the wreckage and lamenting my loss, and one of the guys at the airfield comes over and says, "I know it sucks, but you got to realize if you fly it, you're going to crash it."
That's right.
Which is why Ken is about to inherit. This is why Ken is about to inherit an RCB-25 and another Cirrus, because I have made, and I guess this is the big announcement. Jim, you still there?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Just
the only planes I've flown is a DC-3, a DC-4, DC-6, Lockheed Electra, and a variety of other smaller craft.
those are the classics. The only thing missing is the Constellation. I have
Yeah, I
elected
wish.
to I've elected to back out of RCs. I just have too many things going on, and I've splattered every one of them I've ever built or bought. And
the fact that you can't fly them very well.
That's not a good sign for a real pilot. You
no,
know?
I disagree.
Kind of leery if I was walking onto the plane and saw you in the cockpit waving hi.
You know,
come on
it's
aboard.
different when you're on board.
I would
No.
hope, especially since you're going to get there first.
Yeah, that's right. Listen, you guys may not believe this, but as God is my witness, I tell sometimes, like when the weather's bad or people are worried, I say, folks, don't worry, I'm going to get you there safely. Remember, I'm in the pointy end that gets there first. And believe it or not, it actually works. It calms them down a little
It's
bit.
a very old pilot joke.
But it's true, you know.
It is true. The pilot's always the first on the scene of the accident.
But the thing I would tell folks is that flying an RC and flying a real airplane are two entirely different worlds. Even though the basic physics is the same, but watching something fly and keeping your orientation, and it gets very far away, you lose your. If you want to put me on virtual goggles and have me fly the airplane from a camera in the nose, I'll fly it like the ace of the base.
Yeah, why don't they put a camera in the nose?
They do that on some aircraft, but
They
it
do
looks
that.
weird on a Stuka.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a thing.
I mean,
Well,
they got
that's-
trains. They got trains with cameras in the nose.
Yeah, I got one.
Hold on. Ken and I put a video camera on one of our model trains at the old Beaches Railroad Club and got a whole bunch of footage of the train gun. I was like, so that's what the inside of that tunnel looks like.
There you go. We actually found a model train car that had fallen over inside in the tunnel. Nobody
Yeah,
knew it was
nobody
there.
knew it was there. The ghost
We're watching
train.
on the monitor. There's a train going through the tunnel. So, what is that? Oh, that's a car.
White dash cams are important.
That's funny.
But Ken, for Ken, what did you bond that model with? That P-38? What did you bond it with?
A medium viscosity vaporless glue. Yeah,
What?
Sino. Yeah,
So it was a medium viscosity
that
CA. Okay.
yeah. The stuff doesn't give out fumes because apparently I've become allergic to that stuff.
Lemur Crazy just made the comment.
What brand is that?
This is Super Gold.
Super Gold.
I can't
By the way,
stand
Lemur
it.
Crazy just said I used to practice on RC Simulator years ago. I literally today took over to the new house my RC Simulator with the box and everything. I'll probably still fly RCs online where crashing doesn't cost me $400.
Oh, you mean like that 262 that you rolled
Don't,
over?
Ken. Just don't. Okay.
got a video of it.
Twice. I bought wings and tails. I basically bought 2 airplanes and transferred the guts over, and then did it again, all because the landing gear hooked the grass on takeoff.
Yeah. We'll go with that.
Minor problem.
Let me have my
And
ego-saving
what
fantasy.
about the B-25 that you rolled right up?
Oh,
inverted
who?
right into the ground?
No, Mix. You don't get away with that. Who was the one that said, okay, try a barrel roll with a bomb?
No. I said try flying
Upside
inverted.
down.
That's
I'm
all.
sorry.
There you go.
Yeah.
He said, try flying inverted, Nav.
Yeah.
He did.
Is this your
Right
idea
into
of
the
fun,
runway.
Ken?
So meanwhile, as you're standing over the refuse of your crashed plane,
Literally.
Pictures
Yes,
of it.
that is. We have
in the
pictures.
background, do you ever hear someone saying, "And he's a pilot"?
Yes, and it's usually Ken.
I
You
try
know-
not to mention that as we're standing over the wreckage.
You know my sentiment when I start referring to him by his last name. Thanks,
And then you
Mix.
hear, and then you hear, and what airline does he fly for?
Spirit. Oh! Since you brought that up,
Yes. Who? Brought
and
what
now
up?
for something completely different. I saw an
We're having
article.
way too much fun with this conversation.
I saw an article today. Okay, real quick for the audience. I
You
spent.
realize we're the only 4 on this anymore.
Yeah, everybody, people are leaving left and right, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't hang around for this nonsense either. I spent 8 years at Mesa
Here we go.
Airlines.
Tom Fox says, "Flop gun."
Bill Paul's even better. He says, Ken may have told you to, but who was foolish enough to listen to him?
You know, I cannot argue with Bill Paul's logic on this. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, well, that's just my freaking fault.
Well, after he crashed the B-25, I felt really guilty because I did tell him to fly inverted, and he wasn't able to handle it. That's his fault. But
yes, because you forgot, Ken, I don't normally fly airplanes upside down.
I
What part of
volunteered, and
airliner pilot got past you?
I completely rebuilt it and put it all back together.
Okay,
He paid
translation.
for it, but I rebuilt it.
I bought a new fuselage, wings, and everything, and he put the guts back in it.
Well, the tail was still intact.
$7.
Well, that's the last part to it. So
That's true. It is the part that's the part you always see this about. Why do you think I always ask for row 25?
You should see the ass his wall of shame.
You know,
Hold
you
on.
should have one
I
of
may have
those
taken a
automatic
picture of that.
parachutes that come out and just bring it down. You know.
I tell you what, ejecting like people out of the space station on the green slime. Now there's a reference for you.
And
So,
good news, Monsters in Motion has that DVD for $14.99.
oh my God, only the greatest sci-fi movie ever. Tell me that movie with modern special effects and serious actors would not make an awesome flick. Most of the old, hey, hold on. I'm going to defend campy old sci-fi here. Most of these old campy sci-fi movies had decent premises. It was just they lacked the technical ability, and often the actors, to carry it out. And every once in a while, you get that gem like World Without End or The Day the Earth Stood Still. Michael Rennie's best role.
But they only cost $8 to make, so you know.
Well, you got to put some money behind it, true.
it was $8.25.
Hey, Max. Shaggy Bud says, Ken's a bad influence. He wondered if a flamethrower could be made out of an airbrush. I tried it.
Oh, yeah, we are losing viewers by the minute.
Flamethrower?
It's a good thing I don't monetize this
Gasoline
channel.
in it and hold a flame in front of it.
Oh, Max did something better than that. Max was using that thinner stuff.
Oh, God.
Not anymore.
Remember, with your new compressor, you could probably do that pretty easily.
We laughed about that for 10 minutes. Remember how much fun we made about that?
Yeah.
Well, the one thing about that new compressor, and I got both guns hooked up to it, and that'll be the next thing probably go over to the new house, is that...
Let's call him 6-gun now.
Well, one of the mistakes I had been making was when you use isopropyl to thin acrylic for a spray gun, it dries super quick. Okay? And you can spray something and it's literally dry before it hits the model. So,
Waiting for the hose to melt in the middle of spray.
well, one of the biggest mistakes I made, though, was I kept trying to clean the brush with the isopropyl. You really have to use, now that I'm using airbrush thinner to clean the brush when I'm done, it's made a big difference. But somebody said Roger Corman made... Yeah, Roger Corman did a lot with a little. He was the master of he's the one that's famous for having the Roman soldiers march around the camera in a circle, to make like legions. And I'm kind of like, works with stormtroopers. And by the way, if you guys haven't been watching Andor, it's pretty good.
I mean, he could make a movie in days.
Look, to me, Roger Corman is...
Tom Fox just came up with a great comment. He says, Ken, try this. Ken, to me, saying, try this. Max, hold my beer.
Yeah, that's usually about how that ends up. Here, Ken, hold my cough medicine. And oh, by the way, before I forget, guys, I want to thank Modelon Sean. That's the name I gave him from in Ireland, who gave me this magnificent glass, which I christened tonight with my cough medicine. And it's from the Tank Museum, and it says it's got a Sherman here, and it says, "This is how I roll." Just totally awesome.
And what else would you expect from Ireland but a beverage container?
Power cell drained.
Oh, crap. Guys, the communicator's about to wet the bed on it.
Irish whiskey.
Okay, listen up, guys. I've been using the Star Trek communicator here because it's got a good microphone on it, but it literally just said power cell drained, so we're about to go south here. So I'm going to let everybody go for the night before this thing dies on me. Because we were having way too much fun.
Star Trek. You never hear them saying, "Hurry up, Scotty, my battery's about to die."
The dilithium crystals are about to go south on us. Jim, are you still here?
I'm still here having fun.
Well, look, I want to thank all three of you guys for joining me tonight and making this something special after 2 weeks without. And I'm going to leave the channel open so folks can text back and forth. But I'm going to shut down the operation on this end because I'm pretty sure, although this may be Max's Models Command Central, right behind this partition is our bedroom, and I think my wife wants her bedroom back.
Hey, Ken, wait till we do this from your house. Wow.
Oh, yeah, we could do this all night at my place.
No, I have a 5:45 wake up the following morning.
Then we can go to
We don't need you to be up for it.
Yeah, you can go sleep.
Yeah, I'll go. Just remember that when I wake you up at 4 a.m. and say, "Hey, Ken, drive me down to West Palm." Because I ain't dropping 50 on an Uber.
Yeah, but when you fall asleep, he's going to put you out in the car. So when you wake up, you'll be in the driveway.
If I'm asleep, I don't care.
So, Max, I have a question for you.
Yep.
You ever fly into Vegas?
Have what?
Do you ever fly into Vegas?
The E190 that I'm on now does not go to Vegas, but in January I'm retraining on the Airbus, so I probably will be next year going to Vegas.
Okay. Because if you were in Vegas and you got a layover one night, we could get together here at my house if you want.
I would absolutely love that. In fact, I'll probably give Steve a buddy pass so he can come out and join us.
Oh, that'd be good. I'd like that.
No, Steve hates
Yeah,
Vegas.
super.
Ken, just think what the live stream would be like from Vegas.
Oh, you just had to go there.
No, Ken. You leave Ken here? You give Steve a buddy pass and not me?
Oh,
Who's been your
Ken.
buddy all these years? Who's fixed your airplanes?
That's why he's leaving you behind.
you think I forgot? My wife has chimed in and said no more beryllium spheres.
We only heard half of that.
Yeah, exactly. The communicator was losing
Low on batteries. Oh, fire the Klingons.
The Klingons were interrupted. The Romulans blocked the signal.
This is from
Power cell drained.
Oh, that's it. She's dying on me. Okay, we're going to switch. Hold on. I'm going to switch over to the regular phone here. I don't know if this is going to work or not.
That's okay. We don't need Max.
Okay, I got you guys on the regular cell phone now. The communicator has died.
We can still hear you.
This is a Bluetooth communicator that my magnificent wife bought for me, and I use it because the microphone works well against the micro. We're real sophisticated here. I literally fire this puppy up, connect it to my phone, and stick it next to the microphone so you guys can hear. I am so sophisticated.
This is high tech.
Yeah, he's gonna go a little bit higher tech here real soon. This is ridiculous.
Is he going to get one that works on batteries?
Yeah, he's going to put Tesla batteries in it.
Hey, there are children and working in cobalt mines to give us those Tesla batteries, so you feel good about your green. Oh, wow, was that a little too dark? Yep, we're down to 84 people. We are losing people fast.
I think they're going to sleep.
I don't blame them.
All right, well, I'm going to say good night.
Good night, boys.
Thank you for joining us, guys. I appreciate it, Jim.
Thanks, Max.
This has been a blast. We'll do this again soon.
next weekend at my place.
Oh, yeah.
The 29th, Ken. Is that next week? Oh, that is. Yeah, that is. Next. Okay, guys, assuming Ken got OBS properly loaded, we'll be doing it from his house next Saturday night, which means if Jim and Steve join us, there'll only be 2 on the phone, and the battery will last longer.
Oh, Ken, bring snacks.
Yeah, Ken. Bring snacks, because I'll be there to eat them. Cheeto dust.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You just harshed his buzz.
Hey, Steve, I got an idea. Why don't you fly down too, and we'll just have a blast.
Sure. I got a ticket on Southwest.
Yeah.
West
Come on
Palmer
down, man.
bus, baby.
I got 2 extra rooms you can sleep in.
We'll talk about it.
And now, folks, you are seeing in real time how bad ideas are formed.
Hold my beer, Max.
I think we gave up on kit models a long time ago.
Yeah, there was no discussion of that at any time during the show.
Yeah, welcome to Max's Models, where pretty much just anything goes.
I think that's why most people sign it. You realize that the number 83 watching has not dropped in the last 5 minutes.
Those are hardcore, man. They're the believers, the righteous. No one can go until I finish my cough medicine.
Well, we know you have a bad sinus infection.
Oh, now we're called the Fantastic Four.
Oh, that is not getting old anytime soon. I know I said it earlier, but I want to say it again. When Sean sent me this from North Ireland, UK, I was, along with the models that he sent, I was thinking the postage alone. I mean, I cannot thank folks enough for, the stuff they send me and everything. I mean, it really is motivational, but very moving. I love the Tank Museum. I watch all their videos. I think they're a national treasure of the UK. And this is the first thing I've actually gotten from the Tank Museum. And, I got to admit, and this
and
actually
the
does...
pound is worth 89 cents.
Hey. Not that I even begin to understand British politics, but I saw that their prime minister just resigned, and Liz Truss, she just resigned after like 30 or 40 something days. I mean, my heart goes out, guys. For those of you who are watching from the UK and the colonies, I just hope everything goes well for you. I don't understand what's going on over there, but I really do just wish the best for you, and whatever that is. Typical American, I don't have a clue how they do things over there, but it just pains me to see the kind of turmoil they're in, because there are no finer people on earth. And I appreciate this, and again, to model on Sean and that name it and getting old anytime soon. I stumbled on that by accident, which is how I make all my great achievements, because I am completely incapable of such genius consciously. But anyway, I just want to say thanks to everybody, and to the 84 people that are still watching. I am eternally grateful. I swear to God, I never expected any of this to happen. And I am so happy that that a handful of folks are deriving some kind of pleasure from the goofiness that I do. And I love doing it. And I just can't thank everyone enough. I'm so happy that you're getting something out of this. That's what this is all about. Well, Ken, Steve, I'll leave you guys on the phone for just a second. I'm going to say goodnight to everybody, and then I will kill the mic and the camera and roll the outro or the intro, loop it. You guys can mute it if you... Oh, by the way, I do need to make one quick thing. My son Lou did that music for me at my request. I deliberately requested the surfer music, and he did that on GarageBand. So I want to thank everybody once again. But I've got projects for him for the future. We'll have some other stuff coming up over the next year. Once again, guys, I want to thank everyone for joining us. For those of you who are still here,
the number's going up. the number of people watching is going up.
What have I done?
They're bringing their family in.
You gotta watch these goobers, man.
I can hear the comments now. You want to hear idiots on the phone?
There you go. Hey, Steve, you just named our new show, Idiots on the Phone.
Idiots on the phone.
Oh, my God. And this is how genius happens. Ah.
Dun, dun, dun.
20 years ago, when the People's Republic are asking me, did you do that? I'm going to go, yes. Yes, I did. And I challenge you to do better. Well, folks, once again, I cannot thank everyone enough. I hope you had some fun. All good things and all that. I have been asked if the Tarbis will have a closing ceremony. It will. I've decided by public demand, and that means one person asked.
We're going to have a priest?
I plan to have a decommissioning ceremony when I'm all done. And just real quick, one last thing for those of you who are hardcore enough to hang around. I actually do have an image for you. Where is it? It's right. Hold on. This. Let me hold on. Resize. Fit to screen. Transform. Fit to screen. That is what the Tarbis looks like right now. We got the lights fixed. And by the way, we got the fluorescent lights fixed. It turned out the ballast was okay. It was a bad switch. Literally, the actual physical mechanical light switch had failed. And my brother-in-law, Bob, came over and with all of his he's an electrician, and with all this stuff, and we ran all the it turned out it was actually the switch itself had croaked.
Hey, Max.
Yeah.
Shaggy Buzz got a great idea.
What's that?
He says he'll do it if I suggest it. Here, buddy. Get the compressor and put some alcohol in it and light it on fire and burn the Tarbis down.
Yeah. No. By the way, somebody sent me a video of someone running alcohol through a compressor and lighting it, and it did kind of ignite a little bit. Not exactly a flamethrower, but I have decided in the interest of safety, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I have never
Viking funeral.
No, the Tarbis will be here for the new owners of the house whenever we put it up. Long way to go. I got to admit, you know what? Since you brought that up, Ken, and you and Shaggy Buzz and brought it up, so it's your fault.
What are you getting blamed for now?
You know, I don't want to be all melancholy, but I feel like I'm doing an autopsy on a friend. It's weird. This whole thing, okay, screw it. Time's
there you go.
limit.
Put a plaque on the wall.
Or get a tree in Israel.
To paraphrase the Princess Bride, I explained. No time, I sum up. When we first built the shed, good God, 15 years ago or something? I don't know. We did it because I was working in the garage. In fact, Ken, you remember your daughter when I made the car for her, painted the car for her? When Keeler had the, I forget what kind of sports car it was, and I was out in the garage painting it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even remember that, do you? We're going back a decade and a half.
Lay down.
Anyway, that's when I had that little crappy little one-stage, cheapo spray gun. But I managed to put a decent paint scheme on the body, and then she built the car. And yes, guys, Ken's daughter built a model car. One and only.
Yep.
That's the car. Anyway, it's the same time I painted my Mr. Spock, and the paint I used reacted with the vinyl because it was a vinyl kit, and I didn't know that back then. And I should add, I moved that thing over to the house today, and it's still sticky 15 years later. So the paint is still attacking the plastic. Cautionary tale. Anyway, my wife's like, you need to have a place of your own. And she was the one that came up with the idea of the shed because I married well. And we went and looked at a few places, and The shed was $4,000, and a contractor built it in a day. So I went in there and put the insulation in it and stapled up that the cheapest crap I could find, that white glorified particle board. And
you're responsible for that.
Hey, Ken.
I thought it came that way.
Hey, Ken.
I had to make it that way.
Hey, Ken. Fill in the blank. Anyway, fire truck uniform. Anyway, yes, Ken, I'm responsible for that. But I'm also the one that put up the wood strip there that makes the absolutely cool covering of the seams. But I literally, you're looking at, now there is insulation up there, but I literally put that stuff up there and put it up with a staple gun. Because it was a work shed, right? And anyway.
I will attest to that. I've personally seen the staples.
Roy has the correct comment here. He said, your wife just wanted you out of the house.
Like any good woman does. The secret of a good marriage, moderating your time together. Anyway, I am so going to pay for that later. Anyway,
I like this comment Tom Fox made a little bit ago. It said, well, officer, Ken had this idea, and I had this can of ether, and the rest is kind of fuzzy.
I am so using that next time I get pulled over. Anyway, remember, Ken, if you're the one with the can of ether, you're the one the question marks are on. Anyway, so I had a professional, we paid to have a professional electrician come in and run the power out to it for the AC and the lights and everything. Everything was done to code. The upper right, you can see where the tape is split, where I tried to use tape to seal up because everything didn't line up against the trusses. Anyway, there was a couple of horizontal trusses that I removed. But, you think about it, though, this thing has really been everything I wanted it to be. I mean, I could slap crap up on the wall because no one cared. It was a shed. It was a work shed. I could put model box art up there, anything else.
You should see the crap growing in the crap growing in the air conditioner.
Oh, yeah.
Expectations.
I didn't think I'd be working in there for 15 freaking years. And Mother Nature has not been kind. And by the way, there are all kinds of deposits that I find in that place regularly. I don't know where the hell they're coming from. I don't even know what they are. I don't care what they are. That's
Triffids.
Yes. Oh, since you brought that up, browse, find the picture. I know I loaded it in here. Okay. You guys may remember this from a recent video. It's going to take a few seconds before you see it.
Yeah.
Man, I really should not have watched that movie again.
Where the lizard's going to live, they need the decal diet.
Guys, this isn't from the TARDIS. This is from my bedroom. And you will all note the silence.
And you're telling this why?
Because I'm trying to sell a house. You don't know the pictures I'm not showing you. But those two vines got into the house and grew about 14 feet in length inside the house, which in Florida actually isn't all that uncommon. So we yanked them out. I went outside, cleared out all the vines. It was just, it wasn't that big a deal. But the thing is that amazes me is I found this the day after my wife and I watched Day of the Triffids. I mean, come on! The TARDIS actually doesn't have that much infestation. But it is time to upgrade, our game here and everything. So I love being in that shed, but it's just time to move on, upgrade.
Max is a pod person.
As far as you know. But, really, peeling. Now, some of the stuff, like the pictures up on the ceiling, they're just staying there. They're glued on. They're not coming off. The next owner can paint over them if he wants. But I have had so much fun in this little shed and done so many videos in here and built so many models in there. And now that I'm taking it apart, I actually feel like I'm betraying a friend. And it's stupid. It's just an inanimate object. It's a shed in my backyard. But it's become such a focal part of this whole thing. I don't know. It's weird. I never expected any of this.
It's because of all the good memories you have in it.
I really do. And, you know, I'll be in there working and my wife will come out with a cup of coffee or something. It's just, but the magic is where you find it. Anyway, that glass case on the lower right will be going to the garage and all that stuff will be getting moved out.
Well, another way of looking at it is the new house you're moving into, and the room you'll be using then, you'll get a whole bunch more new memories.
Oh, absolutely. You know, no doubt. And I don't mean to be all melancholy. It's just, I didn't expect to have quite so much of an attachment. And these pictures, these are the ones that are obviously going to, you guys will see them in a second. You can tell I've already started clearing out the shelves and everything. But,
and I just put those shelves up there for you, too.
Yeah, you and I just put this. In fact, we were having a discussion today about whether or not the shelves are going to move over. They're not. They're going to stay in the shed because the garage we're going to has plenty of stuff in it. I don't know. I guess the idea of moving was kind of an abstract thing until we actually did it, you know, and now it's very real. Here's the new place, and this is all temporary. But
well, what you're feeling, I'm sure, I know I have, and I bet you a lot of other people have too. I mean, as many times as I've moved, one place I was only in for a month.
You were talking about that, yeah.
I don't have any memories about that place, but there have been other places that I've lived at that I've been like, you know, I really enjoyed living here. I'm kind of, you know, sad that I have to leave.
Yeah, that happens to everybody, I'm sure. But, you know, stages life and all that good stuff. Anyway. Well, guys, it's pretty much time to call it quits for the evening. Oops, I did
Roy
not
wants to know how many
do
times
that.
you got to walk out the back door looking for the Tarbis and the new house.
Well, we very well may build another shed at the new house. Tarbis 2. And,
a two-story one?
No, we'll see. It'll be a one-story. Duval County has a thing about 2 stories. That's a whole thing. But anyway. Well, guys, I think it's time to sign off. I'm going to let you guys get... I tell you what, hold on. I'm going to sign off here, and then we'll... I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I hope you've had a wonderful evening, and I appreciate you spending some time with us. We're going on... oh, gosh, we're over 2.5, almost 3 hours. Well, anyway, that's what I got for tonight. Take care of yourselves. And as always, guys, model on. Okay, find the button.
Push the button. Come on.